Hey, everybody. Hi.
Yeah.
Use Rakuten to get cashback in store and online. Rakuten is free to sign up and it's in over 3,000 stores. Use it to buy, make.
I have no idea. Funny. It was. Oh. There you go. Okay. All right.
Amy, if you want to leave that, we could have them.
Say what?
If you want to leave your computer after the meeting tonight, we could have them like reload it or something.
Okay.
If you want. Okay.
Ready? We call this September 14th, 2020 meeting of the Menomonie School District to order. Jamie, would you take the roll?
Jenny Bristow.
Here.
Chris Freeman.
Here.
Tanya Huseby. Here. Cliff Moses.
Here.
Amy Little Swanson.
Here.
Charlie Schneider.
Here.
Dave Steyer.
Here.
Jim Swanson.
Here.
Tricia Thompson. Here.
We have a forum to conduct business. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Move on to item B, agenda order approval revision. Does anybody have anything? Okay, moving on. Recommendations and accommodations. We have two tonight. Eric?
Yes, the Board of Education of the School District of the Menomonie
Hey,
area.
stand up. Come on, we're gonna make you.
I don't know if anybody's
Don't
here.
You have a. They might not be here, but it's good.
I'm not sure about.
Board of Education of the Menomonie, of the School District of the Menomonie area recognizes Annie Vu for her outstanding work as a para-educator at Wakanda Elementary. She is kind, courteous, prompt, and always goes the extra mile.
Yep, the one is here.
Sorry.
The next one.
All right. Andrea,
Come on.
come on. The Board of Education of the School District of the Menomonie area recognizes Andrea Worthy for being named the 2020 Secondary Art Educator awarded from the Wisconsin Art Education Association. Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, student representatives. So for the first time in our new school year, I'd like to ask Mesa and Madeline if you guys could give your student report. Do you want just to stand, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay.
My name is Mesa Wilson. I'm the student body president at Menomonie High School.
My name is Maddie Clement, and I am the student body vice president at the Menomonie High School.
You guys will see us at these board meetings giving a little report about how things are going at the high school. Yeah. So first thing we're going to talk about is the new safety measures that are happening in school. From a student perspective, it seems that the majority of the students are complying with wearing masks and social distancing at school. With the nice weather, we've been able to utilize our outdoor spaces for many classes, which has provided students with an opportunity to have a break from the traditional classroom setting, especially now that we're all in very clear rows instead of mingling with each other. We did send out a survey to all students to get a better gauge of how students thought things were going, and most said that they weren't necessarily happy about certain procedures such as wearing masks, but they are really glad to be back in school. The main concern for many students is still being able to go to sporting events and other events after school that make high school, high school. Many students commented that the block schedule has worked really well so far, and we're really looking forward to getting our Chromebooks so that some of our classes can go back to their normal pace.
Yeah, everybody's really excited about being back in sports sessions. Football has just started their practices last week, and they have their first game on October 2nd. Girls golf has had a great season so far. Captain Kieran Evans says they've got an awesome group of girls, and they're having a ton of fun. Their next meet is tomorrow at Spring Valley against Hudson and Regis. Volleyball had tried last week, and they have their first game tomorrow at home against Hudson. The boys and girls cross country team start their season off after a summer of running with their first race on the 29th of August on an adapted Menomonie course against Hudson and River Falls. They have a very strong team this year and are hoping to continue with their season safely. Their next meet is Rice Lake Warrior in Whitetown on September 19th.
And then for homecoming this year, it will be from September 28th through October 2nd. And obviously, it's going to look very different, but the student council is working hard to ensure that some activities still are able to happen with safety measures in place.
Yeah, unfortunately, we had to cancel the parade and dance this year, and both all school assemblies will be completely virtual. But we are still having fun dress-up days, video skits, and wall decorations for students to participate in to keep this year alive.
Any questions? Yes.
Mesa, would it be possible for you to send the student survey numbers over to the board?
Yes, we got almost 200 responses,
Wow.
and I tried to, a lot of them were open-ended questions, so they can make their own comments. And there's a lot to read, so that's
That's
what we
okay,
do.
no, but I would
Yeah.
appreciate seeing that. If you
Yeah,
don't mind
sure.
sharing it with the board, that would be
And
amazing.
I'm going to warn you, there wasn't any blocks or anything, so students could say whatever they want.
That's okay.
But it's okay, yeah,
Until-
I can definitely send an email out. to all of
Yeah,
the
no need to
members.
filter, that's fine. I just am curious to see how the numbers kind of play out and
Sure,
what the
yeah.
students are thinking.
I can definitely do that.
That would be amazing, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, nice job, ladies. Appreciate hearing some good news from the school and look forward to hearing you guys for the next through the school year, giving your reports. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, moving on to community communications. We did have 3 of them turned in, one by Margaret Reich, one by Marlene Schultz, and one by Burton Barnard. What is the board's pleasure? Anybody have any preference? They are available in board docs, if anybody wants to see them.
I can't load them.
I can't read the third one for sure. And I just think
Amy?
that if the people were able to be here, they would be able to read them in front of the whole board. So I think it's important that they be read out loud.
Okay,
I would request that Jamie, sorry, not to put you on the spot, but being your neutral party, if you wouldn't mind reading them, because they all look like they're under the 3-minute threshold. If you wouldn't mind reading them so people's voices are heard, that would be great.
Certainly.
you have a mic, Jamie?
I can just.
Is that okay with the board? To do it that way? Okay.
All right, the first one received was from Margaret Reich. And the subject is the board agenda, item 5F, Paulson petition about the use of legal counsel. Board members David Steyer and Tanya Hughesby should be required to repay the school district for the costs associated with hiring the school district attorney to draft a censure resolution for their own personal use at the August 14th, 2020 board meeting. The board and district administrator are authorized under board policy to employ legal counsel to serve the district. However, this was for personal use, not to serve the district. The board had not yet decided to censure Swanson. There was no legitimate reason to seek legal counsel to draft a censure statement prior to a decision to censure. If there were any questions concerning censorship, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards could have been contacted at no cost to taxpayers. I do not know who requested the August 14th board meeting. However, whoever requested the meeting planned it to be a sham. First, a discussion item was held. In good faith, board members discussed how to move forward. Then the action item comes up. Steyer and Hughesby let the board in for their big surprise. The discussion item was a sham. They had already hired a school district attorney to draft a censure resolution to reflect their own personal wishes. The document was for personal use, not to serve the school districts. Engaging legal counsel at public expense for personal use violates Board Policy 142. It is a misuse of public tax dollars. The next email we received was from Marlene Schultz. I think the district has done a wonderful job making sure our schools are safe for our kids. I think the kids are all doing a good job in wearing masks, distancing. They need the in-school contact. It's too bad that retired teacher has nothing more to do than to cause problems that do not relate to them. I think the school district has done a wonderful job making sure the schools, teachers, and kids are safe. As for football, Coach Labuda has done everything to make sure the kids are safe. Do you really think he would put them in harm's way just to play football? Get a life, Judy. As far as not having fans at home games, at least the parents should be able to attend. That stadium is large enough to social distance, they will wear face masks. Close the concessions and bathroom. This is for the kids to have support. I want to show my support for our school council that has done everything to help our kids. I am planning to watch the meeting tonight, so I hope that supporting to keep kids in school and playing sports will be considered. The last comment was from Burton Barnard. As electors in the Menomonie School District, we should remember with gratitude the amount of work put in by school board members and the district administrator and staff to run a good public school program. As electors, we should also expect the members of the school board and the district administration to explain the hats they wear as they enter their workplace, i.e. who do they work for and why. The personalization of district issues to the point of calling for boycotts of businesses is as ethically unacceptable as is the inability of school board members to check their individual prejudices and personalities at the door as much as humanly possible. Possibly the most honorable way to have dealt with the behavior of board member Jim Swanson is to recognize the way in which it was handled. The board members involved in the use of the school district attorney should put out a detailed account of their actions and the costs involved. Why did the school district attorney move ahead with what amounts to be a criminal account without seemingly reviewing school board policies related to member behavior? It has been difficult for the electors to understand all that has gone on because of the lack of transparency. Would it also not be the most honorable action by those involved with hiring the school district attorney in this matter to reimburse the school district without having to use it as an agenda item? Their actions do not reflect the values of the oft-quoted and sometimes tediously used slogan of the school district as a quoting that replaces or excuses deeper reflection on what it means to be a school board member or administrator.
Thanks, Jamie. And just to point out, I believe both those items will be addressed later on as in the discussion section of the agenda towards the end. Well, one is item 5B and the other one is item 5F. So, Board Superintendent Communications. Does any board members have anything that they'd like to point out or any?
Or we talk too much, but, can I ask, do we know how many people are logged in watching our live stream right now?
23.
23, well, thank you to everybody that's here. I think we need to give those people some props for logging in and thank you for involving yourselves in our board. And that's just something we haven't done so far.
I just want to say that my son Ben, who graduated this past year, is a state of FA officer this year, and they have been going ahead with officer training. He's been doing it for probably 5-6 weeks now, with the other state FFA officers and doing a lot of planning for virtual workshops and things of that nature. So it's nice to see some normalcy returning from the FFA standpoint at least. Any other board members, anything? Okay, Joe?
I have enough to talk about in my COVID-19 report, so I'll just refer board members to the information from School Board Association. If you're interested in signing up for any trainings, you can contact Jamie. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Item I, revenue and expense reports for the month ending June 2020 and August 2020.
Okay, so we'll take a look at the June financial reports first, specifically the revenue report. And just to note that these still are unaudited. They'll be finalized once the audit is finished later this fall. So I just wanted to mention that. For our revenues for our Fund 10, we received in just over 39 million. It was $39,088,930.39. And we did receive our full property tax receivable in August. That gets booked back to June. There was some discussion earlier with COVID that taxes could be delayed, but they weren't for our district, and so we did receive those monies in. And then Fund 21, our gift donation accounts, we received in for the year $116,294.53. And then special education, just over 6.2 million was received in. For our expenses by function, is the next report we'll take a look at. For Fund 10, we came in at 91.9% compared to last year was 95.31%. Obviously, expenses were less than anticipated with the whole school shutdown related to COVID-19. Some of the biggest expenses that contributed to that was, of course, transportation costs, both from Menomonie transportation and then staff reimbursements, canceled conferences and such. And also utilities were down slightly, and then our subbing costs were down as well. So those were the big contributing factors to that for Fund 10. For Fund 27, COVID impacted that as well. That's our special education fund. We came in at 94.59% compared to 98.6% the year before. And then food service, we came in at 96.67% compared to 100.08, so they were slightly over last year. And then our June expenses by all funds combined for the year, we came in at 92.1% compared to 95.33%. Does anybody have any questions on the June financials? Okay, then next up are
August financials, again, taking a look at the revenues. August is a relatively low revenue month. We don't receive any direct aids from the state in the month of August, so the revenues received are all local funds that have come in, and we received in just over 52,000 in Fund 10. In Fund 21, our gift donation accounts, we received in just over 8,000, and then so far for Fund 27, we haven't received in any of those funds yet. We received our first state aid payment for special education in November. The August expenses by function report for Fund 10, we received in 5.66% compared to 6.26% the prior year. Again, some COVID-related expenses, not having summer school like we normally do, expenses were less. You'll see particularly in the, probably kind of hard to tell from this, it's in the expenses by object where you can really see the breakdown, so I'll cover that there. Fund 27, we're at 1.28% compared to 1.14%, and then food service, so far we're at 8.85% compared to 2.79%.
One question, Lee, on the food service, does the meals that are getting paid for, does that affect your budget at all? Or in any way, shape, or form for the coming year, or is that?
We receive more funding from the state because it's run through the summer meals program. I'm not exactly sure what that percentage is, but it is higher than the reimbursement from the regular national school lunch program.
Thank you.
And then the last report is the August expenses by object. And we're at 5.81%. These are all funds compared to 6.19. And you'll see like the salaries is down. We're at 2.65 compared to 3.88, and that's due to summer school. And then transportation is another one that's down because we didn't have summer school transportation. Our costs are less as well. So.
Okay, any questions for Leah? Thanks, Leah. Moving on to item I, monthly employment report. Any questions on that? One thing I did know, we had quite a few resigned. I'm just curious what that was, if it was for sickness or worries about the COVID or what that might be.
Dave, I would say that it's a mix. This is the August report, so many times that's when we find out if hourly employees are not going to come back for the following school year. And a number of them stayed home either because they were going to be teaching their child or a grandchild through the virtual school setting. I think some resigned because of concerns about COVID. But then every year we have a number that resign because of other job opportunities. So I would say it's a pretty good mix.
Any other questions? Chris?
Do we get feedback on that from like a health survey that they take?
Yep, Sam goes through that. And in fact, Sam and I just talked about all these today, and she knows exactly what the reason was for every single one. It's a pretty good mix.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. That's for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Clint, is there a second? Penny? We have the minutes from the regular board meeting of August 10th, our special board meeting of August 14th, the special board meeting of August 24th, annual meeting of August 24th, the annual meeting of August 26th, financial reports, and donations exceeding $1,000. One for $2,500 to the Menomonie Middle School, from 3M for Earth Day and environmental support. Any questions? Chris?
Yeah, I've got one on, there's so many minutes to approve, I think I closed the one.
Can you get your mic a little closer?
Yeah, sorry about that. There's so many minutes this time, I think I've lost the minute I was on. Jamie, do you know which minutes were for the censure meeting? Was that 9:14?
August 14th.
You're talking about the censure meeting that would be.
Yeah, there was the minutes in there, it made a statement that I wanted to correct, but I'm having trouble locating it now. 8:14.
The one from August 14th?
Yeah, I'm there now. And it was just the opening comments from President Steyer, provided background on the reason for the special meeting, and asked Jim Swanson if he would like to resign from the board. And the first part of that seemed to be according with what I remember. But the second part, it didn't seem to me that Dave had asked him to resign. There was a slight distinction that maybe is important. But it was, is if he had considered resigning.
Two parts to my question, if he'd ever given consideration to or was willing to resign his position from the school board. You can go back and look at the tape.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we get that right, because I remember there was some confusion there, because in the censure document, it said that we'd already asked him to resign. And since we hadn't done that, it seemed awkward that we were starting off the meeting with that idea being put forward. So I think it's really important we do go back and try to clarify that to make sure we get all the facts straight on that one. So we should probably go back and check this.
I believe this is an accurate reflection of what actually happened. If you look at the tape and have a discrepancy at our next meeting,
Okay.
we can bring the minutes back for amendment, if you'd like.
Sounds good.
Take a look at the tape.
Thanks.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Jamie, let's vote. Motion passes 9-0. Moving on to the personnel consent agenda for new hires. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Amy, is there a second? Charlie? Any discussion?
Dave, I would just like to say thank you and great job to Samantha Pike and her team in the HR department, all the principals and administrators who are involved with this. I don't think people understand the heavy lifting that it took to staff our schools for the reopening plan. It was a very aggressive reopening plan where we added, we'll see here coming up when we talk about the staffing plan. We added, I think it was over 30 employees between the teaching staff and the extra custodians, and then expanding hours for our supervisory aides and paraeducators. So two things. One, I think it really says something about our district that we can have that many positions and fill them that quickly. And then two, we had a terrific team that put in tons of time. We didn't just hire every application that came in. Every application was vetted. Everyone that was hired, references were checked. It was a ton of work. And I think these people did an amazing job getting us ready for the reopening of our schools. So thank you for all your hard work.
I could not imagine how much work this was. I know I've got to hire a few employees around the farm lately, and that's a lot of work. I couldn't imagine doing that before. Any discussion? Okay, James, let's go. Motion carries 9-0. Action agenda, approve policies 171.2, agenda preparation and dissemination. Is there a motion to approve? Penny, is there a second? Chris? Discussion? We've talked about this some of our last, I believe, 2 board meetings that we brought this up. Any further discussion or questions that anybody may have?
I just think that this is, I said it before, it's completely unnecessary. The unintentional consequences is gonna be very difficult for the board members and other people to bring things before the board. For the board to act on, it's gonna act as a gag order, and, it's just a really bad idea, it should be voted down.
Any other discussion? Comments? Chris?
Was there, and I'm just trying to refresh my memory on this, but were we gonna ask whether or not, that Joe was gonna have to fill out the form as well? Since the, public has to fill out a form and we have to fill out a form, and it was just to guide the discussion so we understand what's gonna be appearing on the agendas for the school board. I know that was part of our discussion that we had thought, and that's the way it originally was. I think it was Clint that said, of course, Joe would have to fill out the same paperwork that we did in that first round of discussions. So is that a reason why that wasn't put into this verbiage in this one?
Tanya, or whoever, Charlie, maybe you want to speak to the, did you draft this version, Charlie?
I drafted the original version, it's been changed a couple times since and updated. I remember the discussion, Chris, I don't remember a conclusion to that discussion.
Me neither.
But I remember, going back and forth about it, and I guess in my mind, I don't know that it's necessary, but that's just me, so
Penny?
that's where I was coming from.
I guess my understanding that there isn't a form, it's just kind of a guideline, and I guess I don't understand, Jim, I'm sorry, for your coming from calling this a gag order. An originator name, what's the purpose, a description of the agenda item, and documentation. I think that that's a solid question to have anybody bring something to the agenda. I don't think there's anything that's making this over the top. It's just giving us more information versus I want an agenda item, but we have no background before we walk into the meeting.
Jim?
Randy, would you define scoping?
I'm sorry, what?
Define scoping,
Where are you seeing scoping?
right in the middle of the document.
Got the 4th bullet point down, circles.
Subheading under what is the purpose of the
Scoping,
agenda?
well, but that's just one bullet point. What is the purpose of your agenda item? To me, those are just additional breakdowns from it. I guess maybe I'm misreading it then, where I give the purpose for your agenda item, just saying I want agenda item X and not giving some background makes it a little more difficult. So, maybe I'm misreading it and I apologize if I am.
I guess from my perspective as current board president, I have no intention of trying to censor stuff that comes before the board as far as agenda items. I just want to make sure that we have the tools to make sure that things are clarified, to be put on the agenda. And this gives the president the ability to work with the board member that submitted it to try to get that information filled out and to make it as useful to the rest of the board when it comes up for discussion. Clint?
For clarification, I do remember when we first talked about this, when Charlie brought the original version through, I was concerned, I wanted things to be consistent for everyone. For the administrator, for Joe, my time on the board, the 2 years, I've never had an issue where he's put something on the agenda that he didn't know what he was getting at or what the purpose of us talking about it was. I do agree it's a little strongly worded under where it says, the proposed agenda item must include the following. I would look at this more like, I guess I was under the understanding this is gonna be more like a guideline or suggestion that you should just courtesy the other board members, inform us on what you're trying to get at, what we're gonna be talking about, so we know when we get here, we're not surprised by things. and we're educated and know what's gonna be discussed. So, I mean, I know it's just a little nuance, but rather than must on there, I like to see more like again, like should include. Because I don't get the impression that like Dave, for instance, is gonna censor what we're gonna be doing, that, you know, or what's gonna make the agenda. I should hope not. I would hope if I came forward with something, whether it was Amy or Dave, the president, that it would get on the board agenda. So that's the only suggestion I got. Chris, I didn't necessarily think that Joe needed to improve on that, but I just want us to be consistent with what we're looking at.
Well, I didn't think that you were saying there was a problem with Joe. Consistency is how I read that too. And that it always helped us all read for our meetings if we had a little background of what's going on. For me, the verbiage doesn't make us, I'm just confused by it. Maybe I'm just ignorant about what these bullet points mean. But it seems to me that some of these things come out of discussion, not really that are put prior to it. And it seems to me that this kind of makes up the person who's requesting the agenda item actually create a policy before we have a discussion of it. So it seems to me that a lot of the things that we do on the board is dialogic and that we want to come to a consensus. And that one of the things that happened with that censure meeting was that there was no dialogue and that we came with the agenda already, or some people came with the agenda already done, it was voted up and voted down. And that creates a real problem in terms of how the board actually operates. Because what we intend to do is that we bring up item, we discuss it. I believe that it should be better referenced in terms of what it's doing and what the intentions are. But to create a fully fleshed out policy that is made before we have any discussion seems counterproductive. And it sets up for precedents that really make this more of an acting of power rather than what we're supposed to be doing, which is deliberating, discussing, and then moving forward with approval and a set of steps. So making all these things happen, like status and revisit commitments, problem solving, risk issue challenge, a lot of those things come out of what we do together as a board to really address what the pluses and minuses are of the agenda item that's being put forward. So it seems to me that the way in which that we develop agendas is meant to facilitate discussion so that the items that we approve can have a growth and can have a kind of coming together of a consensus. And this kind of circumvents that. So I would say that we should just have a very simple form. Instead, we should fill out what the reason for the request is, how we think it will benefit the school district going forward, and that would be the first discussion of that agenda item.
Charlie?
This is at least the third time that we talked about this, and I've said this each and every time. You're reading too much into what's here. The intent is that if I have an agenda item, my name, what is the purpose of my agenda item? I want a policy change. Description of the agenda item, what policy might I want to change, and then include any documentation that I have. That's it. Dave's not going to say, I don't like your policy change. All he's going to say is, yes, you have the information there, so it moves forward. If I want to talk about baseballs, and I put in here that I want to talk about, right now, someone could put on the agenda, I want to talk about baseball. Well, do you want to talk about the color of the ball, or the size of the field, or the team? We don't know that coming into the original discussion. The intent of this is so that we can know, as the rest of the board, what you're thinking, so that we can maybe do a little bit of research on our own to know if you want to talk about changing the color of the baseball or the size of the field. That's all it is. You're reading so much into it that isn't there. The scoping, that might be, I might be asking an agenda item to have Brian break down a curriculum. What does it look like? What do you do? Why do you do it like that? I'm not gonna scope it out. I'm not going to do the risks and the issues and the challenges. That's what I'm asking for. That's what I'm saying I want to have happen in the board meeting. You're reading way more into it than was ever intended.
So Charlie, your point then would be under the second bullet point that you identify one of those 5 bullet or 5 sub-points that you're asking for, not the actual. So the reason would be, what is the purpose of the agenda item? Is it informational or briefing, or is it a proposed policy change? Your intent was not to ask for the actual policy change, but that's what you want to consider?
Correct.
Okay. Amy,
As has been previously discussed.
thank you. Amy?
I would just like to say that I have a feeling, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. I think this all came out of me asking to discuss the union piece. And, Tanya over here had said at that point that she wanted information, because, she said that she did her own research and she couldn't trust what I would say because she talked to somebody else. Something to that effect. Maybe I'm misspoken for what she said. But then Charlie turns around and says, oh yeah, so we put that down so they can do their own research. So to me, that's kind of.
I'll just let Tanya answer that first.
There's nothing about trust. I think you and I had a great conversation that evening because it had teachers union brought by Eden Burrow Swanson, and we were told on a Thursday. So my concern was, what about the teachers union? So I went and took my time and I dealt with what I assumed had nothing to do with trust, but I had one sentence to go off of. So I went and invested 8, 9 hours of time calling friends, hey, help me with this. What do you think this means? What is this? What is it in your eyes as a teacher? What is it in your eyes as a community member? So nothing to do with trust. So that can come right up. And you, I believe, at the end of that meeting, agreed. You're right, we do need to have more words so that when we have to go and get ready for board meetings, we can be more prepared and not waste our time. That's what Charlie's trying to do with us.
Can I respond to that? Yes, I originally wanted at least maybe there was your name and the purpose of the agenda item, yes. It makes information. But all this other verbiage and scoping and all of that.
Tammy?
Well, you know what, Jim and Chris were ahead of me.
Okay,
So
Jim.
let them take
Well,
their-
I just want to say, Charlie says he only wants the originator's name and something on the purpose, but the way it's worded, the way it's written, the way it's structured, it's not what it does. So that's your intent, what you have written here is not what you're intending to do.
It's not true.
Yes, it is. Because as Clint said, you have the word must in there and you list all of these things that must be in there. If you take the word must out and you just put originator's name, the purpose of the agenda item, and the description, and then supporting documents, you cut out all the rest. But the way you have it written right now, it is not what you are saying.
If we strike the words, the proposed agenda item must include the following, and instead just have,
I think Clint did when he said should, and then take out all of the clear bullet points. I don't know what you call them, but they're the ones that are colored in.
personally, I don't have a problem with that. Well, Charlie?
Is what it is. Well, then if I'll make a motion to.
We have a motion to amend, or?
A motion to amend, yes. We already have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
So I'm going to motion to amend to change the word must to the word should, and then to strike everything from informational briefing down to status revisit command. Just take all that out.
Clint?
If we do this, I have a question directed at Charlie, since he's the original author of this. What do we lose by taking out those 5 clear bullet points? Just background information, or?
I think you're gonna get an agenda item that says you wanna talk about the teachers. You're gonna be right back where you were. That's my point.
Chris, I think,
This
amend.
is my order. I made a motion. You need that.
Sorry, Jim. Is there a second? Chris?
Yep.
We have a second, sorry. Thank you. Chris, you were next.
Yeah, the big problem is that this assumes that everything that we do is policy related, which is of course not the case. You could even say that the bulk of our discussion is about things that happen to do with work culture discussions, when we talk about working with Joe to make a statement about the voucher program. We talk about making statements about the Native American mascots. I mean, these are important discussions that we have to have, but they aren't necessarily policy related. So all the subheadings and those clear points presuppose that everything we do is policy related, which, well, they are. So if these things that we have to include relate to policy when it's not necessarily a policy discussion, then, That doesn't make any sense, because then those agenda items wouldn't be able to be on there. So since those things aren't necessary for everything that we put on an agenda, they should not be put on a form that declares the necessary things for things to be put on an agenda. Because not all things that we add to an agenda requires those bullets. Does that make sense?
No. How is the bullet informational or brief about specifically policy? It could be about anything.
Well, the proposed policy change is the scoping and breakdown plan seems related to the one that goes above it.
Maybe or may not be.
The problem solving means that there's a problem with the policy that you're trying to fix, which isn't necessarily the case. And then I don't understand the status and revisit commitments part anyway. So you're right, that part doesn't, but I don't really understand what that means, and we're gonna have to write, an explanation about that just before we can vote on it to make it part of our policy, because that's not clear.
I guess, I just want to interject here, and Charlie, one of the reasons why I think that I could support some of, making that change is I think it's incumbent upon the board president to make sure that if this policy is put in place as is, to make sure that the agenda items are clear and that there's purpose, the reason behind it is clear to the board members. And I guess I'd be willing to give it a try if we do this and we don't achieve that goal, then I could see making it more strict so that we can, I know you put a lot of work into it. Any?
Just a couple thoughts. Chris, you keep coming back, yes, this is changing the policy, but it's not specifically about talking about policy. It's about agenda preparation. So it can be anything from a resolution to bullying to a policy change. And this doesn't mean we're going to vote on it. It means it's a discussion item, not an action item. And the other thing I wanted to point out is this is something that's going to help, hopefully, help the board long after Dave is the president. Everybody keeps reflecting to Dave. He's the president right now. Amy was just the president. Who knows who's going to be the president? This is, if you look at this, where this was first approved February 19th of 1992 and has so many revisions reviewed. It's crazy. So there will be many other presidents from this point on. And I guess I agree with Dave to a certain extent where let's approve something and run with it. And if it doesn't work, guess what? We bring it back and we revisit it. And we make it better for the boards down the road when none of us are even part of this anymore.
The other thing, Joe.
I just had one question, because when I read this the first time, Charlie, those hollowed out points, are those each requirements, or are those examples of the purpose?
Those are examples of the purpose.
And it sounds to me like some of you think that each one of those would have to be answered for every agenda item. Is that the intent?
Not at all.
Is that what you guys are thinking the intent is?
That's what it says.
Yeah.
So if you want to
That's
change
what
it
it
to
says.
such as,
The way it's written, that's what it says you have to do.
So maybe something like that would accomplish both goals, to still provide some direction to what purpose means, but maybe some additional language that says, what is the purpose of the agenda item such as, or something like that.
For examples or something.
Yeah,
Examples may include.
Well, you have an amendment already, so it's already been dealt with, basically.
Well, we have a motion, or an amendment to the motion on the floor right now. We can either pass that, or we could fail it and re-amend it, or we could, it's whatever the board's pleasure, I guess.
But you need to hold a vote.
Well, if there's no more discussion, we will. All I was going to say is if, rather than the current amendment that's on the floor, if we took out, after what is the purpose of the agenda item, in parentheses had possible examples may include, and leave the bullet points in there so that then they're not required, they're just directives as to things that could possibly be included in the motion. That's all I'm saying. Charlie first, then Chris.
Another way to do it would be to drop the sub-bullets, but give the purpose of the agenda.
And that's what Jim's.
Just what I just proposed, that's the one, that's the one we've got on the floor.
How do you mean, Charlie? So we take out the bullet
The
point?
bullets that are hollowed up, take those out, but I believe Jim also had another point of, change.
Are you talking about taking out all of the wording that goes with the bullet points as well?
With those hollow bullet points, you could take those out. Again, all that I'm looking for, all that I'm asking for is, why do you want to talk about this?
Sure.
Give us a little bit of information so that we know what's coming.
As I understand it, that is the amendment, just to take out the hollowed out bullet points.
It's somebody,
And change the word must to should.
that's the other difference, big difference.
Tricia?
So my 2 cents worth, I like having the additional information. I like having the ability to say, oh, okay, well, this is the item that I want to add. Oh, yeah, I should look at, this, make sure that I'm filling in all of the information, because I want to be complete. And I can also say that if I submit something and I have everything listed that I'm supposed to, and the board president or whatever decides that they're not going to put it on the agenda, that's my responsibility then to come back and say, listen, I wanted all of this, I did all this, and I wanted it on the agenda, and if I met all of that, then I would, I guess my responsibility would be to say something about that. I don't honestly anticipate that being an issue, this is just my opinion, but I don't want it to be so narrow that it doesn't provide information in terms of helping to support me as a board member to make sure that I'm being complete when I'm requesting something.
Let me ask you this, Tricia. If we left the word must in there, and after what is the purpose of the agenda item, put in parentheses, examples may include the following, in parentheses, is that something would that?
Personally, I like that. I like having the may include items that listed.
Okay, so, Chris?
Okay, so if we're getting to that, and we're getting some idea of how we're moving, I mean, we have some part of this. The one part that seems to be missing is that I think the fear is that whoever the board president is will deny a agenda meeting that would not serve the best interest of the board. So can we add some language that if the board president decides to not approve of a suggested agenda item, that they have to write a written explanation of why and submit that to the board? That way we can keep out in front some clarity and at least some understanding of how decisions are made and make that transparent so that we can all be comfortable that, yeah, okay, whoever the board president is did due diligence and that the board president has an explanation as to why this proposed agenda item should not be included and explain why that is.
It does go against the second sentence in that next paragraph.
Not necessarily, only if the board president decides to reject the proposed agenda item. Having been board presidents, would you guys feel that, because you guys wouldn't really reject these things anyway?
Well, I was gonna say, can you think of anything that has been rejected since you've been on the board?
No, I think it's just that this extra burden of making compliance where there's only one person that gets to approve that. In the rare case that they would deny, say it was something that you didn't approve of, like such as the union discussion, and that got denied, there should be an explanation as to why. And since it would hardly ever happen, it would seem like that would not be an undue burden for the board president to have to comply with.
Should we start with the motion, the amendment that's on the table right now, and make a vote on that, so we can clear that one off at least, if we want to move forward with the amendment? The amendment is to change the word must to should, correct, Jim? And to strike the clear bullet points with the words behind them.
Correct.
Under what is the purpose of the agenda item? Let's start with that. If you vote affirmative or yes on this, then you want to make that amendment to the main motion and change it in that format. If that's not the way you want to proceed, then you vote no. So let's vote on the amendment as stated. Clear? Jamie,
Right. And that was,
do you want to do a voice vote instead, or would you? Is that easier?
oh no, either one's fine. I just want to make sure Jim had made the amended
Yeah.
motion first.
Good.
I just want to make sure.
Okay. Okay, then if you're ready, can you vote?
Kenny,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Tanya,
No.
Clint,
No.
Amy,
Yes.
Charlie,
No.
David,
No.
Jim,
Yes.
Tricia,
I need clarification.
So if you, by voting yes, you will strike out the clear bullet points with the descriptive information, and you'll change the word must to should. By voting no, you will defeat the amendment that Jim proposed, which then takes us back to the main motion, which we can amend down the road if you want it. That's up to the purview of the board.
So no.
and you were yes?
No.
No.
Motion fails 5-4. Okay, so the amendment failed. Any other amendments or discussion on the main motion? We're back to square one, where it is right now. Chris?
Okay, would it work to say, as Joe had suggested, under bullet point 2, where the subheadings are, we say, for example, that may include the following.
Are you okay if we put examples may include in parentheses?
Chris, are you saying, do we want all of those things in there? Is there anything we'd strike from those for clear ones? I don't have any issue.
I personally don't understand the status and revisit commitments, and I don't personally understand the scoping and breakdown plan. Now, I feel if the person is filling out those other items, that we'd have a really good understanding of why the person is proposing the agenda item and what their game plan is in terms of how they're going to implement that. And I don't feel that we add anything by adding those other two things, which I don't personally understand anyway.
Did I
So I would
say,
prefer to strike those two and say, for example, for the other bullets, which are 1, 2, 3.
the nice thing is that leaving them in there really doesn't hurt anything because it's only examples.
I just don't understand what those mean.
So is your motion to include, for examples may include in parentheses then behind?
I don't think it hurts anything, you're right, to leave them in, so I would not vote, that's fine. Whatever moves this along is fine.
Behind, what is
Also,
the purpose of the agenda item, parentheses, for example, examples may include parentheses. That's your motion to, or
And I
amendment?
would also like to amend that we require the board president to provide a written explanation as to why, if the board president chooses to not allow an agenda item to go forward, why they deny it.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Jim? Any discussion? Okay. Jamie, you got all that? So we're on a second amendment. This amendment would, after what is the purpose of the agenda item, add, for example, examples may include in parentheses. It would also include a sentence about the president. If he rejects a agenda item, to explain why, reasons why it was rejected. Okay, so we're still on the amendment. Okay, Jamie?
This time we'll start with Chris.
Yes.
Tanya?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes. Yes.
Tricia,
Yes,
and Penny.
Yes.
Okay, now to the main motion. Any further discussion? Okay, Jamie, let's vote on the main motion, or you can bring this one up on the,
Now, this is with the changes, correct?
this is with the amendments that were just voted on. So we're voting on the main motion. No further discussion? Okay, Jamie, start. Okay, motion carries 9-0. Okay, that was a long way around, but I think we got a good product and it's all said and done, so thank you. Action item 4B, approve update to the SDMA employee handbook. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Penny, second. Clint? Joe?
Basically, this just allows us to have the hourly employees who typically accrue leave each month, allow them to use that accrued leave, use that leave before they actually accrue it. Especially with COVID concerns and then the drawdown of many people's paid leave banks, we think this is a good way to help support our staff members who may need to have paid time off. It should be noted that through the various coronavirus relief packages, all employees have 2 weeks of paid leave for coronavirus type of absences. But so this not only could be applied to a coronavirus situation, but other things that might not be related to COVID.
Any questions? Jim?
Is that 2 weeks above and beyond what they're getting now?
Yeah, the 2 weeks in the coronavirus package, that's totally separate from paid leave.
Okay.
But we still think there's a need with some employees that just don't have that time built up yet from last year.
Chris?
Could you just explain how that works a little bit? Because I know some people were concerned about that because they had used up all their sick leave bank or whatever. So how does that kick in or how do they access that early?
Well, Sam put together a document for every one of our staff members, so they have the information. It's also available, through all sorts of governmental websites of how to apply for it. It's kind of like FMLA, except it's specific to coronavirus.
I meant this one, that we're now allowing employees to access paid leave benefits.
Right. That it's just our paid leave that we have. People who are not hourly employees, they accrue their paid leave, all of it right at the beginning of the year. But the hourly employees accrue it as the year goes on. This will allow them to access that leave right now instead of having to wait each month to get more leave accrued.
So they can access their whole year's leave.
Yes.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Amy?
I just have a question. What happens if, heaven forbid, that we go to all virtual? And like last year, the peer educators, that's why they had to use all that leave because there was no place for them. So I'm wondering what you're gonna do in that situation. I know it's a what if, but it's a very hypothetical what if. And so I worry about that. And if there's a way to use those peer educators to help with the virtual education, like small groups or tutoring or something so that they can still keep their job.
You want me to answer what happens if we go fully virtual?
Yes.
I guess we'll have to see when that is and how long it is.
Okay.
It all depend on what the circumstances are.
Okay. Well, I just would like you to consider if that's the case, that you figure out a way that you can utilize the peer educators in the virtual setting if at all possible, so they can keep their jobs, is all I'm saying, and they're sick leave.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Jamie, let's vote. Motion carries 9-0. Action item 4C, approve update to the 2020 to 2021 staffing plan. Is there a motion to approve? Charlie, is there a second? Chris? Joe?
I mentioned this a little bit earlier when we congratulated the administrative team for all the hires that they did. And some of the additional staffing had already been approved, but we want to make sure that the board is well aware of any changes that are made. So you can see there that there are a few hourly positions where hours need to be included. Also, an art teacher, we needed to increase that contract a little bit based on the needs of instructing students. So it is quite a bit of staffing we've done. The other one that we haven't really talked much about recently is the energy manager position. And if you recall, that's been on our staffing plan proposal. It was on the proposal last spring. And we waited on that based on the budget situation and also where we were moving with so many other things in the school district. At this time, you know that we've changed the airflow in as many buildings as we can. Where it's possible, we've increased outside air by 50%, and that's one of the mitigation strategies that's very important. However, that requires our current maintenance staff to do a lot of changing on that system, and they really aren't trained in that matter to manipulate that system that often and that much. Typically, the changes you would see would be more about when you have the system run, setting it when it's going to be at full occupancy or nighttime occupancy or whatever those settings might be. But with the number of changes that we're now making and then having to work with our systems, we are concerned when we get to January when it's super cold out that we're going to have to pay very close attention to those systems to make sure they can handle that amount of cold, fresh air coming in and still do the job of heating the buildings. So between the current situation with the pandemic and then also with the goals that we have in our strategic plan before COVID-19 hit, we feel that this position really will pay for itself eventually when we're able to realize the energy savings through using our HVAC systems to their maximum potential. But to use them at their maximum potential, we need someone who can actually really be trained in that and who has the time to really monitor those systems so that they work as efficient as possible. So to me, it's kind of merging in two areas here. One is our needs right now with the pandemic, and then two, our strategic plan with our energy goals. I think now is a good time to do that. Otherwise, we're just gonna have to keep contracting out of the district and spending the dollars that way and only really achieving one thing at a time. So my recommendation is that the board approve these increased hours and then also increase our staffing plan to include an energy manager.
Okay, discussion. Amy?
I will vote for this because it's good for kids and it's good for the airflow. But I'm wondering, when we talked about the clean energy 2050, this kind of fits kind of right into that. And of course, we didn't actually vote on that. We've pushed it forward to February, which I think is a political move. And so I just want to make a statement that when thinking about this, we need to think about that as well, because if it does come back in February, they might be able to help us lead. Conservation voters might be able to help us out with some of this. And that's, we could vote on it. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Well, what do you mean by helping us out, Amy? Because I'm curious.
Well, we didn't vote on that, and it seems to me this fits right into what we would be doing if we voted to have to do the clean energy plan.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
I assume we'd be posting this and hiring for this immediately?
Yes, I don't know that it'll be the easiest hire that we've done.
That was my next question.
So we certainly would post it and, make sure we can hire a very good candidate. I know that CVTC has programs in these areas too. Maybe it's something where we could collaborate and kind of grow our own person. I guess it'll depend on what kind of interest there is. I do think we will have interest, but this is kind of a rare position, so it kind of remains to be seen.
So I thought this is definitely on the radar prior to COVID, and we were talking about the green energy. I just think, obviously that education, that skill set is pretty unique, so the right person really could easily pay for themselves.
Yeah, Kevin Tomaszewski, our Director of Building and Grounds, him and I have talked about this a number of times. And again, this is not just, with the clean energy, this was in our strategic plan well before that. And the idea of managing the energy in our district, we know we have opportunity there. And a position like this could really help us accomplish that part of our strategic goal. And if the board does move forward with clean energy, which I think we already are in many ways, and you look at geothermal in Downsville and things like that, there's opportunity there too. And I think a position like this could help support any efforts, not only with energy management, but also with clean energy.
That's kind of what I was wondering about, was the Downsville. Charlie, you're pretty well versed in this whole realm, and I was curious what your thoughts on this were.
Specific to Downsville or district?
Both.
Well, Downsville's a great example. You've got a system there that is very technical and could reduce energy costs dramatically, however, it currently isn't. So someone like this, a good experienced person coming in, should be able to get that system to a place where it is doing what it was sold to do originally. And as Dr. Zadowski stated, my bigger concern with the COVID thing is all that fresh air that we're bringing into the building to ventilate. Are we gonna start freezing up coils, or are the buildings gonna start getting cold during the day and not being able to keep up? Someone should be watching that on an hourly basis and making sure that the building is able to keep up, or closing those dampers down so that we can keep things from freezing up and causing bigger issues. Because just bringing in outside air is a good thing, but it can cause other issues, unintended consequences.
Thank you. Chris?
Charlie, are there, as far as training goes for people that we would hire for a position like this, is there a specialization that we want to be looking for, that we would put into the job description that Sam would do, that would be thinking along the lines of how, we've already started geothermal in Downsville, and we probably, if we're gonna go with this green energy initiative, we want to expand on that. Are there people that do training in HVAC that would have more expertise than others in terms of moving towards geothermal and thinking about how you best manage those types of technologies rather than the technologies that we already have?
The technical colleges, there's a couple of them across the state that do a great job of training people in this kind of work. And part of it is being a technician and working on the boiler or on the air conditioner, but also part of it is working on that control system. And if I were going searching for someone like this, I would go to talk to the person at CVTC and say, I want somebody who maybe isn't as good as at your boiler or your air conditioning, but really good at that controls piece. Because that's I think the district has some people that already can do those other technical pieces. That controls piece is where I think this person could be very helpful. And find somebody who's really good at that. And it could be a new person right out of CVTC or someplace like that, but I think the district is also very attractive to somebody who doesn't enjoy being called out at 3 a.m. when somebody's furnace goes out, or the at Clint's office or something like that. Those kind of that isn't going to happen as much in the school district. So I think it would be attractive to someone like that as well. So might pull someone who's more experienced from an existing company is what I'm saying.
Chris?
It would be super helpful that if we had the will on the board, and it seemed like we did, but we wanted to have to devote more time to dealing with the COVID situation, that if we had our green energy plan more formulated, up and running, that this could be a very attractive position for somebody who would want to manage that transition from older technology into a new, you know what I'm saying? So if Sam was writing up the description for this job, it would be super appealing for somebody who wanted to work in this type of field, which is transitioning to green energy, to take on this position. It would look a lot different than managing maybe a more outdated system that was in most of our buildings. Does that make sense to you guys a little bit? So it might be the time for us to revisit that sooner than February rather than later, because it might be really helpful in pulling exactly the type of person that we would want to implement the types of changes that we can consider.
I guess I disagree with you, Chris. We have a timeline on that, but the thing is, the district's been doing a ton of work on this for quite a while. The Downsville project was many years ago to convert that over, and I think our need is we have to have somebody in place before, I would say within the next 60 days at the latest in this position to do that. Jim?
Yeah, just a quick question. It says that the contract is renewed annually. Does that mean that this is a temporary position or a full-time permanent position?
It's a full-time permanent position, but
Okay.
it's not a one-year contract.
Okay.
Could I add something? You know, so Chris, we did share the job description with you. It's in your packet there. I don't know if you saw that or not.
I probably
Oh, yeah.
did not, because I don't remember reading a job description. That is it says job description on the top of it.
Yeah, it says job description, and one of the bullet points says research new and innovative technologies within the energy industry.
What I'm saying is that if we had a plan that was going forward that was showing that we were going to be transitioning to these other technologies, that would make us more attractive for the type of people that want to work in this type of field. So I was suggesting not that any of this thing was wrong with anything, but it might behoove us as a district to make ourselves more attractive for exactly the type of person we're looking for. And what I mean by that, and Dave, is not that I'm saying that we should not hire this person now, but that we should reconsider that green energy initiative now. So that in the next 60 days, when we're getting the type of candidates we're looking for, we might get exactly the person we're looking for this other transition, which we're probably going to be voting for anyway. So I'm not saying not to do this. What I'm saying is we should bring back the green energy discussion and try and do it now if we can get something done and on the table to make this position look as attractive as possible to that person we'd like to get. That's all.
I guess one thing I'd say is that, first of all, I hope it doesn't take us 60 days. I think we'll have someone hired before then. And I think if anything, it might be the other way around. If we can get someone on board, that will help support Kevin in terms of helping to develop whatever it is the board wants to be developed. I think, you know, to me, I would make the hire first. Now, if we can't find someone, that might be a different story. But I think we'll do well. It's just, I haven't hired someone like this before.
Any other questions on the staffing plan?
I think we should move ahead and get this person hired. This is a little bit different position for an institution sector like ours. So it'll be interesting to me to see who comes forward and stuff. But I think it spells out enough in there in the job description, but making sure the person knows they're coming on board for an institution that is looking at innovative changes that are going to be good for our environment, good for our pocketbooks, good for the taxpayers. I think makes it more attractive, more exciting. So it's kind of, I hate to micromanage, but I think it's kind of Sam's job to paint this as what it is, but make it something that's a little more exciting than managing like a 50-year-old boiler in the basement or something, an old schoolhouse or something like that. But I think you get too picky on the qualifications. I do think it's going to go hard if you start looking for a master electrician, master plumber. That's going to command a little bit more than what our salary range is. That's not what we're looking for.
Chris?
So I agree, but we can't massage that job description until we have a good understanding that we're actually going to do that. Like, we don't want to paint ourselves as the district that's going to do these things, and then we don't do these things. So it would seem to me that it would be a really good idea to really, since this is something that's a board discussion, maybe bring it up at the next board meeting, reviewing the green energy initiative, and to try and get some discussion and see where we can find some common ground in order to make, as Clint said, this massaging of the position by Sam something that is not just pulled out of the air, but it's like it's really intentional, that we can feel good about representing ourselves in that way. Because I know Clint would not suggest we should misrepresent ourselves, so it might be a good time to go forward with that.
Majority of the board voted to want to put that off until the February timetable, so unless I hear different, that's my.
I have a question about that. With Robert's Rules of Order, are you allowed to table something more than one meeting? I kind of thought about it back then, but there were some other things I just didn't think was a battle worth fighting at the time. But I was just looking.
My understanding is yes, you can.
It wasn't tabled, it was postponed definitely.
Postponed indefinitely, which is a little different. Chris?
That's true, but that would only be the case if there weren't this other extenuating circumstance that came up that now made it worth our while to try and get our consensus together now.
Okay.
So if this didn't happen, right, then it would be February. But since this is happening and Joe came up with this idea to try and get someone who could manage, right, our system, then it would, and Clint suggests that it'd be a great way to sell our district as a forward-thinking district, then why don't we put that into practice and try to get this done now rather than February?
Okay, I think we're getting off subject. We have a staffing plan. This is a table of discussion. Any more discussion on the staffing plan?
It's pretty much related to the staffing plan, since we're staffing someone that's going to be running the HVAC and energy system. It's an energy manager. So it's definitely not tangential. It's sort of like the point.
Any other discussion? Okay, James, let's vote. Motion passes 9-0. Discussion items, policy review. So I'd like to start off, Dr. Zadowski, with the COVID-19.
Okay, first of all, I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. This is fairly lengthy, but I also think this is probably, in my mind, the most important thing that we're doing tonight. And I'm very happy to report that the first couple weeks of school have gone really well. Certainly, it's a start of the school year like no other. And I want to compliment our students, our teachers, our staff members, and our families for just knocking it out of the park and doing a great job with all the expectations, the mitigation measures. And I'm very happy to report that, how many days are we in now? It's one big blur. This is the beginning of our third week. So we had 2 4-day weeks, and now this is gonna be our first 5-day week. So we're 9 days in. We have not had any reported cases of COVID-19 in our schools since the start of the school year. Now, I wish I could promise you that that's going to be how the rest of the year will pan out. I think we all know that COVID-19 is here, though. It's in our community, especially with our community changing so much, with our friends in the college coming back. We're seeing the numbers increase dramatically. So we are prepared, but it has been a great start to the school year. You can see when I typed up this report last week, we had 215 cases of COVID in Dunn County, with 177 recovered. That number has grown dramatically since last week. And my understanding is that Stout started their antigen testing in their dorms. Katie Gallagher, I just talked to her right before the meeting here, and it sounds like that's gone very well. But I think we also know that numbers overall have been changing quite a bit. To summarize a little bit some of these issues, I'm going to skip over them, so if you have any questions, please stop me. I do want to talk about masks for a minute. You all know that Governor Evers had the mask order, and one of the questions that we're receiving quite a bit is what happens when the mask order expires on September 28th. Schools across the state are all wondering the same thing, as are many businesses and other places. At this point, we plan to continue following the governor's mask order when it does expire on the 28th, and we have a school board meeting on the evening of the 28th. There has been some talk about the mask order possibly being extended at the state level, so we're kind of waiting to see if that happens. If it does not, we will have a recommendation for the board that evening. What I can tell you, my personal opinion, is that masks are a very important piece to our mitigation efforts. I do think that masks need to continue to be an important piece moving forward. I do, visiting the schools and talking to our staff members, I do think there are some things about the governor's order that perhaps could be modified if it does not get extended. For instance, the study that Alex Hall and KT Gallagher shared with us about COVID-19 and the spread of COVID-19, it's pretty clear that if someone is sitting silently, the chance of particles spreading is very, very small. So I think what I would like to see is our teachers have the autonomy to have the ability to give mask breaks to students. But I think some very clear guidelines would have to be provided for our teachers and our students. For instance, if students in the entire classroom are all seated and they're all conducting an activity where verbal interaction is not going to be needed, taking a test or silently reading or things like that, I think there's some ways that we can learn how to live with these mitigation measures that can be a little less restrictive than what we're currently doing. But that is putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because we don't know what's going to happen at the state level. But what I can tell people is that I think masks will be an important piece for the entire first semester, and we will have a recommendation for the board on the evening of the 28th if the order does not get extended. But unless there's some direction by the board, we will continue under the current situation in terms of requiring masks at all times. Physical distancing in classrooms. Again, I just want to applaud the work of our maintenance staff, our principals, and everyone who did such a good job with this, our teachers. We have 100% of our classrooms in K through 8 that have the ability to be a distance of at least 6 feet. And we thought that we would be able to get at least K through 6, but then with the virtual program that we have, and then the extra work that people were able to do in the buildings, we were actually able to extend that all the way up through 8th grade. So in the event that we have to go to a blended model, we now feel that we can keep the entire middle school open as well, not just grades K through 6, because we can get that 6 feet of distancing. Even at the high school where we knew that 100% wasn't going to be achievable, we're able to get about 2/3 of our classes at Menomonie High School distance of at least 6 feet. Again, that's a huge accomplishment and it required a lot of work. We were able to acquire many more desks and other furniture that's needed, and we got some really good buys on when we did that. Staffing wise, we already covered that, so I'll kind of skip over, other than the fact that we did hire 23 extra teachers, 7 extra custodians, 2 supervisory aides, and then we've also added a school nurse, student health assistant, and then increased several hours. I guess I didn't really skip over that, but I'm pretty proud of that and what our district was able to do. I don't think many districts around the state were able to make that kind of commitment and then act on that commitment like we were able to in Menomonie.
Just to interject, Joe, too, Eric, talking to some teachers around the state, there's a lot of them that have to do dual virtual teaching at the same time they're teaching in the classroom. And it's not easy for the ones that are doing this.
You know, choosing our virtual program was not an easy decision either, but that was one of my biggest concerns, was making sure the teachers who are in the classroom are able to provide that in-person instruction, are able to really focus on their students. And I do know, especially some of the smaller schools that weren't able to do what we did, they have their teachers doing both at the same time. There's a camera set up, and there are some advantages to that with students that may have to come in and out of the system numerous times during the year. But I really think that our virtual program has rigor, and it has the ability for students to really push themselves if that's what they want. So I'm very pleased with what we've done with our virtual school. It wasn't the easiest to get going. First we had to prioritize the devices, and devices, like I mentioned, it was like a run on toilet paper last spring. Katie and her team did a great job. We had 1,000 more devices delivered last week. Those are being deployed this week to finish it off at the high school. But with our staffing, I do want to say that our teachers have been instrumental in keeping our classrooms operating as smoothly as possible. And we're able to hire those full-time substitute teachers, and those have really come in handy, especially when we have situations. We haven't had COVID cases in our schools, but we have had some situations where there may have been close contact or the exclusionary factors for symptoms. They're very strict. And there's been some students that have been excluded or sent home and not able to return. But it's not only just that student, but it's also siblings. And it's also if one of their parents or both of their parents are staff members in our school district, they're excluded too until that exclusion period is expired or there's a negative COVID test. So we have had some of that, which has put pressure on staffing, but because of the staffing that we did and the staffing plan that we have, I think we've worked it out quite well. But that has been a point of frustration, not only for the school district, but also for families. And I absolutely appreciate that. I know some, family members, they know that their child, this time of year ends up having allergies, or they know that they ate something that didn't agree with them. And then if there's a combination of 2 symptoms or more, then they're excluded. And we feel terrible doing that. At the same time, excluding people with COVID is the single greatest mitigation measure we have to protect everyone in our schools, all of our students and staff. Some school districts have gone away from that guidance, so they're not following the guidance from the health department. I would not recommend that we go away from that. I think it's a very important mitigation measure in our toolbox. Now, we have learned that we are able to have baselines though for our students. For instance, if a parent knows that a student does have allergies, our school nurse is able to work with them and work with their physician and have a baseline set, so that particular symptom or that particular issue would not necessarily be an exclusion anymore if that's part of a student's baseline. The free meals for kids program was extended through December 31st. Of course, we found out about it like the day before school started, so we did as best as we could to communicate that out. We're also providing meals for families in our virtual school program, and I appreciate the work that Michelle Closer and her team have done on that. It is contingent on funding though, so even though we're hoping to have it through December 31st, it's going to depend on how that funding is distributed and how quick the program is used up by the number of schools participating. I mentioned technology already. That has been a challenge, but I think we're getting to where we want to be. In the event that we have to shut down fully, I think we could have some challenges at the elementary level, but I think we worked through those pretty well last year, and I know Katie and her team are already planning to see how we could work through those this year again, if we had to shut down fully. I mentioned the virtual school. We had about 600 students that originally signed up. I think that number dropped down to about 550. Brian, I might lean on you here a little bit for those numbers. I know we went through them today, but I can't remember them all. It dropped down to around 550, 535. It dropped down quite a bit once we sorted through everything and once some people changed their minds at the original sign up. Once school started, I think some parents realized pretty quickly that that just wasn't a good fit for their child or a good fit for their family. So we did have a drop window that we opened, and we had about another 35 families that chose to send their children back to school to in-person instruction. So, we're working on making sure those students get in the classrooms. We're making sure those classrooms are balanced so we can still achieve our distancing. But one challenge, especially for high school level students, because we went to a block schedule, which I think Mesa mentioned, is students really feel it's a good thing, especially in this time period. Those students who are just coming back to school, they've missed a lot. I mean, if you think about how much they've missed in a block schedule, one of the teachers told me it's about a quarter of a semester class already. So we are concerned that, as people come back in, it's going to be a lot of work for them to catch back up, and we'll certainly try to support them the best that we can. Transportation, Menomonie Transportation has for years given us great service. This year's no exception. And I can't compliment enough Kyle and Ryan and Tom and everyone over at the bus company. I have the summary reports uploaded for everyone to take a look at. On September 2nd, you can see that most of our routes were very good routes in terms of the spacing of kids, cohorting kids. But what we saw is that there were a few routes that definitely could use some relief and make it that much safer. So we added a whole extra bus, and that was able to impact 3 routes and really lower the numbers on those routes. So at this point, you can see that our routes are running very well. In most cases, we have one child to a seat, or they're seated by family, or the next step would be by neighbor. So we feel really good, even though we'd love to have enough buses to go one to a seat across the board. We feel that what Menomonie Transportation has done has been just marvelous. Are there any questions at this point before I wrap this up with the fall activities? Okay, so then as you know, fall activities have started. The kids that I've seen and have talked to are just elated to be able to have these opportunities. I really think it is important for them, and I'm glad the board made that choice. It is a challenge, and our coaches, I know, and our advisors are working through those challenges. Like the girls said tonight with the student council report, homecoming is going to be drastically different than it ever has been. But we're still trying to give those opportunities the best that we can. With activities, now that we know that they're going and those are underway, the next step is to talk about spectators. And when we have events, what does that look like? And different schools are doing different things. The Big Rivers Conference announced last week that conference schools are not going to be allowing visiting fans to any sporting event, and that most schools are going, it said all Big River schools, but that wasn't the case, we're going to allow home families to come watch games. I was not aware of that press release going out. In fact, I was very disappointed that it went out because I knew that we had been working closely with Stout, who's one of our partners for this, but also internally with our athletic department. So that was a little bit of a surprise. And certainly the Big Rivers Conference does not speak or supersede decisions that we make here in the district or the decisions by our health department or our community partners. So as we continue to work through this with Stout, at first it appeared that we just simply were not going to be able to have any spectators at our events. There's so many concerns to think about in terms of bathrooms and concessions and entries and physical distancing and the use of masks and all of that. I'm very happy to report that in working with the chancellor, who I've been super impressed with, and then working with our athletic director and talking to our coaches, we have come to an agreement now that will allow for up to 50 fans to go to an outdoor event. So if we have a football game at Stout, 50 parents could attend. And then if there's an indoor event, it would be 25. We would align that with the Dunn County Health Department. We still plan to stream as many events as possible. Our website now includes 2 streaming channels. I know Mr. Mirren has already been working on that. He's already had training and had other people train how to run the streaming systems. We think that's the safest and best way for people to take in these games. But we also really appreciate the desire of parents to be there. We wish we could just say across the board, like some schools are doing, that 2 parents or 4 parents or 4 family members would be able to go to these games. But we also have to remember that many of our rosters are much bigger than some of these smaller schools. Our football roster, for instance, we have 52 boys that are planning to suit up. If you look at Elkmont or you look at some of these other schools, in many cases, you're not going to see those kinds of numbers. So we do feel like we have a plan that's as safe as possible. The health department has given consent, and I really appreciate the work of everyone at Stout to be able to allow us to do this. Stout is really locking down right now. They're not having any of their sports going on this fall. So for them to continue to work with the school district and then also be considerate of the needs of our families is really quite impressive. So with that, that's kind of the end of my COVID-19 report. There was a ton on there, and I guess I'd be interested to see if you have any questions or concerns or suggestions.
Amy,
I have a question about the 50 people, if we have 52 kids, that's like, what about 3/4 of a parent can show up? So I guess I'm wondering how they're gonna figure out who gets to go and who doesn't. I'm afraid it's gonna cause a big fight or something. There's gonna be like a lottery, or how are you planning to do that?
We plan to have our coaches work with the parents. For instance, I know that in some cases, schools are really prioritizing the parents of senior students first, or the parents of the people who are going to see more time on the field, things like that. I think River Falls, for instance, I don't know their plan by heart, but I think they're going to be allowed up to 100 spectators, and they have similar numbers to us, but I think they're going to look first towards their senior parents, and then juniors, and then sophomores who may see the field. But I know that we all want to provide as much opportunity for families as possible, but every county has different guidelines, and every county has different needs. So I would anticipate they'll probably prioritize the seniors, but I'm sure the coaches can work with the families and get that figured out.
Thank you.
other questions? Chris?
And I was trying to keep up with you, but a lot of information.
It's a lot, sorry.
No, it's nothing. It's wonderful to watch. So when we get to the buses, and I get that there were buses that were at full capacity. And then they made adjustments to then bring that carrying capacity down with students. And then there's 20% of routes that are now operating on the green status, which seems to me kind of like full capacity, 2 students per seat instead of 3 students per seat. Is that what that means?
Full capacity for the buses would be 3 kids per seat.
So 2 is still like right there, that's not much of an improvement for, addressing that sitch. So when it says, I'm just gonna try to get a sense of the numbers, when it says that 20% of the buses are now green, which is 2 per student, but then it says or less, do we have a sense of how many kids are actually sharing seats in the bus? Because I think that was the idea, that you want to try to get 1 student per seat. And so if they're pretty close to that, and they're sitting with their neighbors, I would feel, I guess, less uncomfortable. But if we're talking about 20% of the buses where they're pretty much at 2 kids per seat, that seems like, when you consider the aerosols and you consider the shared environment, that seems a little more concerning. And then I'm also concerned about like what routes they are, if this is, just for our own understanding, if this is affecting disadvantaged kids more than other types of kids by understanding what routes those buses are servicing. So I guess, and I tried to click on those links because I thought that maybe they were live links, but they didn't take me anywhere. But is there a way we could request from more information from the bus company to understand exactly what that looks like in terms of kids per bus, and then what communities those buses are serving to make sure that certain people aren't being, because we're finding out that certain communities are being victimized by COVID more so than others, and we really want to try to understand what the demographics are in terms of the kids that are being put in those situations. Does that sound fair?
So you weren't able to read the reports that were provided?
No, I have the report and I'm reading it. I don't see each specific bus that has the number of kids per seat per bus.
Okay,
So what I have, and maybe I just didn't click on the right link, what I have is a mitigation effort that moves blue buses to now green buses. But I didn't get the actual numbers in the green buses. And to see what it looks like, I just got that it was 2 kids per seat or less.
well, the transportation report from September 4th, 2020, that would be the one that I would suggest you open and read. These,
I was on the next one because I thought that was the one where they actually implemented the changes.
well, that one includes information too, but you were asking what the description of the different colors is? So.
No, I get that. I'm just trying to get more specific descriptions for each particular bus, the seating arrangements on these buses. So we can understand what that means when it says that at the green level, we've got 20% sitting on a bus with 2 kids per seat or less. And when there are 2 kids per seat, they are neighbors. I was wondering what the breakdown was. Say, I don't know how many seats are in a bus, but let's just say there were 30 seats in a bus. Does that mean that we've got like 25 seats in a bus that they've got 2 kids per seat? What does that look like? And then I was wondering if you get a sense, and maybe I'm just not understanding it correctly, but where bus routes go and who those kids are that they serve.
Well, again, I think I would go to that September 4th report.
Okay.
And the second paragraph says, we have categorized our routes into 4 levels. An excellent level has 1 family or less per seat on the bus. A good level has 2 neighboring families together in bus seats and does not exceed more than 2 families per seat. A permissible level is a bus operating at a maximum capacity of 2 riders per seat. And a concerned level would be a bus that has surpassed the goal of 2 riders per seat. So then if you go and you cross-check that, you can see that the routes are really in good shape. So you gotta kind of do a cross-section of that description with all the routes, the route report that they provided.
I get that. I just don't see that 2 kids per seat is acceptable situation. I understand that it's better than 3 kids per seat, but what I would like to know is how many seats per bus are 2 kids per seat? And I would be more comfortable with just like 2 or 3 seats that had a couple of kids on them. But if you're talking about, a bus that's really running where every seat has got 2 kids per seat, that really becomes a situation where you got a lot of aerosols being exchanged. You got a lot of kids sharing the same space. And that becomes more concerning to me. So I'm just trying to get good information so that people know that, like, oh, okay, it's not just that they're making improvements, but that parents can make the right decision to take on what the actual conditions are of those buses.
Well, I think the bus company did an awesome job of giving us good information. And if you look at the report from September 9th, you can see.
September 4th.
Well, no, now I'm looking at the head count
Oh, I'm
report.
sorry.
It says bus report September 9th. You can see that almost all of those routes are in purple. Okay? And you can see at the top of the page, it says purple is excellent, 1 family per seat or less. So there's, a vast majority, there's hardly any green ones even, which are good, which would mean 2 neighboring students per seat or less.
I get that. I was only talking about those green buses. Like, I'm happy with everything. I just want to know what those green buses look like in terms of their actual circumstance. If they are buses where we have the majority of those seats with 2 kids per seat, that would seem to be a very concerning situation to me, and parents should know that. No, I think those other routes are great, and I think the bus company is great. I'm just wondering if we can get better understanding of what the actual conditions look like in those few buses that are green routes. How many kids per seat are on there?
Well, so let's look at that. So like bus number 3 in the morning, that one's listed as green for the middle school route, 27 students. So the bus capacity at 2 to a seat would either be 44 or 48, and there's 27 students. So what that means is that in most cases, the kids have their own seat. There are a few cases, what would it be? There's probably 22 seats.
So there'd be
So there
like 5
might,
seats.
depending on how many are families, there could be somewhere between 0 and 5 kids that are sitting with their neighbor on that particular route. That's pretty good.
I think that is good, and I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to get help on understanding what that actually means, and so I appreciate you taking the time to walk me through that, because I didn't know exactly how many.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
when I read what the report says, and then I look at the number of green routes, I was wondering exactly what it looks like for those green routes, and so I appreciate that. So I'm gonna go now to September 4th. Is that the report I'm supposed to be looking at? To then extrapolate the numbers of kids per green bus routes.
While you're looking at that, Chris, do you mind if we?
Well, how about this, Joe? Did you see any ones that were any worse shape than that one that you looked at? Because you looked at these. If that's the worst case scenario we have, then we're doing pretty well.
I think we've done a great job, and I think the transportation company's done a great job, and, if you wanna go through route by route, we could do that. I'd suggest that maybe give me a call sometime or something like that, if you want. Unless the board wants to go route by route, we could have Tom or Kyle or someone come in and do that. But, it says, like, for instance, in that September 4th report, 66 afternoon counts were taken, leaving the middle school. 53 of the 66 were excellent, 11 were graded good, and 2 were permissible. So then because of that, we added that extra bus, and now they're grading much better. They were already great, but we got rid of those permissible ones. So I just think if you read the stuff that's here, Chris, I think you can kind of see it. And then if you have a question about a particular route, I think we should probably connect outside the meeting, and we can have a conference call with Tom or whoever you want, unless the whole board wants one of them to come and go route by route through that.
What I'm really looking at is that we can identify the weakest links in the chain, and I was hoping that that was already going to have been done. Like, these are the 2 routes that we think that maybe are the weakest, and we'll look at that. So here's what they look like, and then that would be explained to us. So if that hasn't happened, I'm not complaining about that. I'm just trying to understand what that looks like, so those people that have kids in those buses can know which buses those are, and which routes those are. If none of those exist, then that's great. I'm just afraid that they do, and that I thought that maybe we're going to get that information to us. Because I think that Charlie was the one that brought that up at the last meeting, that we'd like to get a detailed report on what the buses look like, and then we can make changes if we need to. So that was at the last meeting, and then we were like, yeah, we're going to look in more detail about it. So I didn't necessarily want to not take time going over this in detail, since it was brought up at the last meeting that we were going to go over it in detail.
Okay, I will say, Chris, from my standpoint, we have a very detailed report. I just think that, from my sense as a board member, I think you talked about adding 3 additional routes, Joe, to try to help out with stuff, and I feel very good about what Menomonie Transportation has done, and like kudos to them for the hard work that they put into it, so. Jim?
So first I want to just say, personally, if we made a motion today and vote to have mandatory mask for the rest of the year and before it, I think it's really important. My question is, so on your report here, it says the activity level is high, the burden is high, it says the trend is horizontal. Although I know there's calculations that the positivity rate at the end of last week in Dunn County was almost 7.5%, which in anything above 5% is really an issue. In some places are really upset that they're over 5, and so it's not good here. But I thought according to the plan that if the burden was high and the activity level was high, then it was time to start looking at moving up to the next level in the program. You know, what considerations you could have moving up one step to the blended learning and going to cohorts, and where are we with that?
Well, actually what the plan says is that if the burden is high and the trajectory is increasing, then we have the conversation with the health department. Last week's measure did have a high burden, but the trajectory was still horizontal. Now, we are anticipating that this Wednesday, it's very likely that that trajectory is going to be increasing. So at that point, KT Gallagher and I need to talk about it and really analyze that data. I already mentioned we don't have any positive cases at all in our school district from staff or from students that have been reported. That certainly could change. That needs to be considered. It also needs to be considered where these cases are in the county. I do know that there are some schools in our county that cannot say what we are able to say in terms of having no positive cases. But I think we also know that there are many cases right now with our neighbors in town here at Stout, and how that could possibly bleed into the school district is an important consideration as well. So KT has been great. I talked to her again today, and not only are we watching the model from DHS, the State Department of Health Services, but we're also looking at the Harvard model, which is more of a daily percent per 100,000 that we're considering. And I'm very concerned. I do think that the possibility of going blended at the 9 through 12 level is something that we'll be considering very, very deeply, probably this week. So it won't shock me at all if when we get to Monday that we are in that blended model. But I really think KT Gallagher, her communication and looking at the specifics of our school district, the ages of the people being positive, I think all that comes into play.
Tricia?
Is trajectory the same thing as trend?
You know, the trajectory in the DHS model, I went and I read it, and it's a statistical calculation where they calculate what's called a p-value. And I haven't done statistics in a long time to that level, but it can be calculated, and basically it's just really showing the differentiation of how many cases per day. So now that we're seeing that big jump, I would think that that p-value will be high enough to be what they consider significant. And if it is significant, then you'll see the increasing trend. But I'm sorry, trajectory, and that's why people get this all messed up. Let me just pull up the website real quick if it loads.
That's been one of the questions that I've gotten from so many people, and I honestly, I tried to find the answer. In terms of how trend is even determined, it's not really clear. And then when you said trajectory, I'm like, is that the same thing as trend?
I apologize, this is taking a long time to load, but I can envision it perfectly. If you go to that Dunn County dashboard, you know, you have your number of cases, and then you have your burden, which is calculated those number of cases over the population. But then if you go to the next page, or the next column over, let's see here, now it's coming up. So you have your trajectory, which that number, I'm not sure how they calculate that. The trend is either an up arrow, horizontal, or down. If that goes to an up arrow, then we have the increasing trend based on that statistical measurement, that p-value. So when we look at that increasing trend and the high burden, that's really where our concern is. Because what increasing trend means is that it's acting in a way that it hasn't before. So that means that it's likely that the health department could have difficulties with the contact tracing, with the isolation, with all that stuff that has to happen. And that's probably even more concerning than the high burden level, because they're not able to wrap their hands around it. And that's where all these extra mitigations have to come in to try to, isolate and contact trace and do all that so that we can minimize instead of having to continue to explode.
And I really do thank you for that explanation, because one of the things is I feel like the more information, and sometimes information can be too much, but in this situation where parents are trying to figure out like what's gonna happen in terms of how am I gonna deal with childcare if we have to shut things down in certain ages or do a blended version, is to, when you don't understand, like having information to really get a better grasp on, okay, this is where we've been, this is where we've been going, and it's more concrete in terms of the explanation about what's going on. I just think it helps. But I get like this is such a crazy situation that we're dealing with. But that's why I was asking, trying to figure out like where's trajectory versus trend. And
Okay, I was able to open it up here, Tricia. As long as you ask the question, let's do this. So trajectory is a measurement of the percent case change. So then the trajectory status, I think that is what the trend is marking. So in terms of trajectory status, if the percent change in cases is less than or equal to negative 10% and p-value is less than 0.025, then you would be shrinking. If the percent change in cases is greater than or equal to 10% and this p-value is less than 0.025, then it's growing. Otherwise, it'd be no significant change. That's where it's horizontal.
perfect, thank you. And
What that means,
right, I mean, I get it. And this is another reason I'm glad that Steve's here, so then people can rewind it and they can understand it more for themselves as well.
and that page is linked into all these weekly updates I'm sending out for someone who really wants to get into those numbers.
Thank you.
Who's first? Jim, actually. Just since we're doing technical stuff, how does the the positivity rate figure into which one of those numbers?
I don't think the positivity rate does.
Okay, because a lot of places use that as a measure of how they're doing. I was wondering if we were looking at that at all.
My understanding is that our Dutch County Health Department is not readily tracking. I shouldn't say they're not tracking it. There's not a mechanism for us to track it from the public standpoint.
Okay.
Chip was tracking it, I believe, and there's some other counties that have different measurements they're taking. I don't think we have that here in Dutch County.
I'm not a mathematician or lots of words, but anyway, I know there's more and more cases going up, so the thing I don't know is which ones have recovered and stuff. And I know it's on the dashboard, but is this just something that's gonna be evaluated on Wednesdays? And I think that's what you told us before, correct? Because there's been more new cases Friday, Saturday, Sunday of this past week. So it just kind of depends on how many of those recover, because if I look at that, we're gonna be over that 10%. So is this something that's gonna be evaluated more than just on Wednesday, because things could move very, very quickly? And then the other part of this question, Dr. Joe, is, I know we talked a little bit about the subjective side of it. What if there's pockets like Boyceville, Colfax, or Stout? How is that gonna factor in when you meet with Katie, the public health, and decide what's gonna happen? Because parents are very much up in the air as far as what they're gonna do with schedules, daycare, and that type of stuff.
Well, it's been made very clear all along that even if we hit that threshold that we've been sharing about high burden and increased, now I'm confused. Increased trend. Even if we hit that threshold, that isn't an automatic move to blended learning. Now, if we hit that though, and we can't identify what's going on, or if the hospitals are, at max capacity, or if, they're seeing, increased cases in children or something like that, yeah, all those measures would come into play in the decision. But like I said in the COVID-19 report, I'm very pleased that K through 8 were able to get that 6 feet of distancing. So even if we go to blended, at this point, I would anticipate that K through 8 would continue 5 days a week, and the 9 through 12 would be the ones that would go to the A-B schedule of blended learning. I know our principals have already been working very hard to make sure that that schedule is ready, And we will, in our communication this week, whether or not we go to blended soon, we will be sharing with families what that will look like so that it's not a shocker. I'm hoping we can get through another week without going to blended, but the way the numbers are looking, I do think blended is probably in our near future for 9th through 12th grade.
Chris?
What is it, and this is probably just ridiculous, but since we have a much higher ratio of classes than we anticipated in high school, and now do have 60, because we took some provisions to make that happen. So we've got 2/3 of the classes that have 60, and we got 1/3 of the classes that won't be able to make that social distancing. Would it be preferable to actually just maybe make those 1/3 classes go online and just keep the kids going to school 5 days a week for the 2/3 of the classes that would be able to do that? Or would that just be a logistical nightmare? Because it would be nice to have parents have their kids go to school 5 days a week and then find some arrangements where they can do their online learning if they have their laptops in another kind of scenario for the 1/3 of the classes that they work. I don't even know what those classes look like. It might be that it might be preferable to, if those classes line up in a certain kind of way, to make that, transition happen, to not have to go to the blended, and hopefully we would never have to go beyond blended anyway, because we seem to have a pretty low incidence, in Dunn County right now. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I think that is a terrific idea. And I think that if we get creative, and we've talked about this, we don't have enough large classrooms to do it. We don't have enough auditoriums or lecture halls, but we have a huge field house. We have a huge gym.
Yeah.
I think that it could be possible to be very creative and do exactly what you're talking about. And we are planning to talk with the principals tomorrow about that. I think that's terrific.
Would it make parents, they would have some sense that okay, because we don't know what's going on with this blended switch, and that's the thing that's tricking a lot of folks, and it's making me envious of those people that have kids in school. If you can make that kind of accommodation, especially if those are classes that really are the ones we want our kids to concentrate on, and really be able to stay.
The only thing I would say is that the classroom piece is the biggest piece. But we spend all that time talking about the buses. That could be an issue. Because as you pointed out, there are some situations, even though there's not many, there's some situations where neighbors are riding on the same seat together. There are situations when the kids get to school that, they're going to their lockers or, getting them from, the parking lot to the classroom. Our principals are doing a great job. You talked about maybe a pinch point, that's a pinch point, and I think those things need to be talked about with KT Gallagher. I feel good that once we get students into the classroom, that there's things we can do, but getting them into the classroom and then out of the classroom is a concern. But I also think it's important to understand that we're doing amazing things in the schools, but there's also things going on outside the schools that are really impactful. And I know that, our students are having gatherings and, you'd like to think that they're cohorted. My understanding is that, at least one school east of here, I don't want to say their name, at lunchtime, they're not distancing the students. They're allowing them to sit in their cohorts because they know that these kids are cohorting and doing their thing. So it is, it's for me, it's really hard to think about the idea of not allowing kids to come to school for in-person instruction if they want to, and they're cohorting anyway.
Just for clarification, Joe, are you saying that even if we did have to go to a blended learning environment, if we were to make use of some of the other building rooms inside the high school, field house, et cetera, that we might still be able to have the entire high school in class?
I think that's something we need to look at, and if we can do it, I think that's a good idea.
Amy?
I can remember what I was gonna say. I've heard that teachers that, they're involved in this a lot. I've seen articles about this. That teachers really just want to have those kids there for at least 2 weeks so they get to know them. So then when they do have to go into blended learning, at least they have the name with the face and know the person. So that we've already been in school 2 weeks and hopefully maybe a third week.
Yeah, I really think that was for the virtual more so.
Mhm.
I know that was one thing that we were just counting the days, one, we wanna make sure the kids do get to know their teachers, especially if we're gonna go full virtual, and they weren't gonna be, if we go blended, they're still gonna see their teacher every other day. But going fully virtual, that was the biggest concern, is that if we have to go fully virtual before the teacher even gets to set expectations and meet the kids and, get to know who they are, that would be a challenge, but we're beyond that point. To me, the real pinch point this week is making sure these kids get devices. And, Katie and her team have been working around the clock, they got the shipment in, and 1,000 devices that they have to prep and get out to the site and then find a safe way to distribute them. Those are all pretty big challenges, they're not insurmountable, but it's a lot to deal with. But I think what Chris said there, and one thing that I hadn't really thought much about, we talked about using these other spaces to hold classes, but if some of these classes are gonna have to go more virtual anyway, in the alternating type of schedule, they'd have face-to-face one day and then virtual the next. If we went full virtual with those classes, then you could utilize a large space, assuming there's enough bandwidth, where those classes could be offered. You could have students in the field house or the gym, spread out, and the teacher won't be instructing, it would be online. I guess I'd want to talk to the principals about that and see what the teachers thought about that, but I think it's definitely something we should look into. We'll talk to the principals tomorrow about it.
So this morning I had to call Menomonie Transportation because I am bringing my kids to school, but of course, now that I'm pretty much a single parent, I was like, if I have to use the bus because I cannot physically get to them, can we just add them? And it made me think afterwards, like, if with the weather changing, family situations change, with the weather changing and such, and there's more kids, I think that's probably one of my biggest concerns.
Sure.
Some of that we just can't plan for. But then I'm also just concerned if, like, what we were talking about with the different versions of blended or virtual, blended, and just adding more kids to the transportation side of things. So it's not that I'm looking for a solution right now, I just wanted to make sure to mention that.
And Trish, I know that one thing Menomonie Transportation really wanted to convey was how appreciative they are of the families for transporting on their own. And every family's different, and I don't care to know your business, but I do know that some families essentially are cohorted, with whether it be their neighbor family or maybe grandpa, grandma, or whoever it is. And I really would encourage families also to consider backup plans, so that if they do run into an issue and they're typically transporting on their own, is there another opportunity with a group that they feel safe doing that with? I know that's not gonna work for everyone, but I think that planning ahead, especially like you said, with the weather being bad, would be a good idea. But we're also not gonna turn kids away. It's, they're sanitizing their hands when they come on, they're wearing the masks. I do think there's many mitigation measures in play.
Good.
Just a little side note, there's gotta be, like, at the middle school, for instance, about twice as many kids getting dropped off in the morning, just my experience from being there. And it's moving, I don't know what's going on, I expected it was gonna take longer, it's moving really well, so good job. I see Bart's not here, but, whoever's managing that, I don't know if it had to do with the parking lot changes that were made a year or two ago, but I'm impressed with how quickly that's moving. It's moving better than it ever has, and there's gotta be twice as many going through there every day, so.
Yeah, I don't know if it's twice as many, but there's definitely more. I think a couple things, like you mentioned, the turn lane and what the city of Menomonie was able to do with us and increase or improve the road there. But also, I know that every year, Mr. Betcher and his team, they do a great job, and actually usually it starts off pretty good, but it's so frustrating when people pull in, and if they don't go all the way up, and they stop right in front of the doors, that really slows things down. But when people go all the way up to that drop off, and also I noticed that people are getting out the whole length of that drop off. There used to be a sign, get out, it'd be like, get ready here, get out here. Well, now it's get out the whole thing, and then also.
We'll see when it's rainy and snowy what happens.
But you're right, and that's typically what we see, as the weather turns cooler, more parents, it's your natural intuition to pull up to that front drive, the doors are right there, and you stop. but that just creates havoc for everyone. People just go up, it's only about 15, I think I counted it one day, it's like 15 or 20 more steps. It's not that many, if you just pull up, that keeps that whole line moving.
Trish?
As a parent perspective at Oakon, I can tell you, it's really busy. It's like the
Yeah.
last day of school every day.
Yeah.
And I think, I've seen, everybody seems to be, I haven't seen any like, people being, yelling at other people or anything like that, but I am worried about like with snow and
Yeah.
like, there's only so much you can do.
Well, I tell people too, it's kind of like going to a Brewer game or something like that. If you want to see the first pitch, don't go, the game starts at 7 o'clock. Don't pull in the parking lot at 6:55 and expect to see the first pitch. And just like at the end of the day, if you're going to stay for the last of the game, then either tailgate for half hour and then go, or whatever. But no tailgating allowed in the school parking lot. But I think you get the idea.
Just have a question, Joe, on the spectator issue. It's been pretty well publicized since Friday. And has there been much consideration to the sports complex or the use of that for football? Or is one part of the question. And then how does opening up Williams Stadium affect other sports and attendance and things of that?
Yeah, it was very challenging. And again, I want to compliment Stowe for being so good to work with, but especially with what their rules are for campus and trying to be consistent and stuff. It seemed on Friday, and actually the release went out, that we weren't going to be able to have any fans. And I know one of the ideas was, well, what if we just host it at the sports complex? And I was very concerned about that. I am very concerned about it. It's like anything else. Could it be done? Yes. But I really feel that everything we've done with our reopening plan has been putting kids first. And I know that, I can't imagine my senior football season not, being able to have my parents watch any games. They're already not going to be able to go to the away games. I know that's a big deal. I mean, a lot of these parents have put in tons of time running their children all around, and whether it be to the weight room or camps, a lot of them invested big money to do this. At the same time, though, you look at the sports complex. I mean, if you put on the freshman, the sophomore, the JV, and the varsity teams, and then you have the soccer, I mean, that thing is pounded. And the original plan was to have turf out there, but and we raised a ton of money, and the community was so supportive, but there wasn't enough to put turf on there. I really don't feel that grass field could handle that and continue to be a safe venue for our players. And then also, you talk about concerns about putting people together. The WIA is allowing the football teams this year to have the guys on the sideline stand from the 10-yard line to the 10-yard line. Well, if you've ever been in a small school game, like when I was in Cadet, people can't see unless you have elevated bleachers. You can't see through those big guys wearing the shoulder pads and all that. So that really would limit you from the 10-yard line to the back loop to the next 10-yard line, and then try to put all the parents in there, trying to get 6 feet and keep people separated. And then if people are cheering or yelling, to me, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. Also, we really, I talked about the live streaming we have going on. If we're at Stout, we can get a really good vantage point for that live streaming. We do have lights at the sports complex, but they're not going to be as big and as bright as what they have at Stout. We'll be able to provide a very good, high-quality live stream for these games. If we have to use a scissors lift or a box lift, I don't know all these different lifts, but if we have to use some sort of lift at the sports complex to record or to stream those games, I think that's going to be a challenge. And then, just people coming in and out. At Stout, there's different gates and all that stuff. The sports complex is not developed to the point where we have good entry and exit and all that. So my personal preference is absolutely to play at Williams Stadium. I'm very glad, even though it's very limited, I'm very glad there's the opportunity for some parents to watch. I don't know. I don't know if board members think we should look at something different, or I don't think we can get turf put on there by October 3rd.
I don't want to go, not by October 3rd, but I think it would be a wonderful avenue to start looking on getting our own and less collaboration with Scout. It just seems like, I think you're being very humble to be blatantly honest, on the outside and reading. Science, I think this would be a wonderful
is how much our district and how much our community pays to use Don Nona Williams Stadium. Not to mention Don Nona donated that to the community, not just to Stout, but to the school district as well to use. So one of the concerns I have, or that I've been hearing, and I have it personally as well, is what is our obligation to Stout annually to use the stadium? And is any of that being forgiven this year?
Well, I think, I'm really glad you asked that question, because I do think there's a lot of misconception out there. And I have not done an audit of the bills from Stout or anything like that, but we've had these discussions in the past. And my understanding is that the Williams family made a very, very generous donation to get that project off the ground. But I also understand that donation was only a percentage of that project. And the district really has no ownership in that facility for that reason. I know the intent, my understanding is the intent absolutely was to have both the school district and the university collaborate. And we have for many, many years, and it's been very, very successful. And they've been great to work with this year, even though it's challenging dealing with the pandemic and how our institutions have different expectations and such. We did contribute $100,000 towards the re-turf of that field. We have talked in the past about having some sort of annual fee, or, a lot of schools do that. I mean, I saw the numbers for over at Oshkosh, and it was astronomical what the school district has to pay to play there each year. We don't pay. I mean, we were very instrumental in the creation of the stadium. Our contribution, I think, really, and then the collaboration that they were able to share with the state boards and such, that they had to get that turf project approved. I think that was very instrumental in helping that happen. But we don't have an annual fee. We do have a split on the concessions. We do pay fees for the garbage and some of the cleaning that has to be done, but it's not like we have a rental fee or anything like that. They've been great to work with.
How often is the turf fee, the 100,000?
Well, it depends on how the turf ages and such. I think you'd probably look at that, over at least a 10-year period, maybe more.
Tricia, do you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, in regards to volleyball, so that's an indoor sport. So does that mean that they have to stay within the 25?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the plan right now, Tricia. Again, not only for following the health department's guidelines, but also for managing the spectators in the bathrooms. And we have more space in the gym to be able to handle that. But that's also 25 per event. So like volleyball might have 4 events going on at once, and then, we're gonna have to manage that and make sure that, the varsity parents are watching the varsity kids and then leaving, and, some of them are on at the same time. So it's a lot for Mr. Marin and the staff to work on. But that's one thing we're trying to do, is we're trying to be consistent. The policy we released on Friday was gonna be consistent by saying no events that are able to be streamed will have spectators. But since that time, and then also with the feedback we received from parents and our coaches and our players, we've modified that now to, align with those Dunn County guidelines. And we'll continue to evaluate it. We'll see how the events go. And I think that's another very important piece to this. A lot of it's going to depend on how people comply. I know one thing with Stout, if there are people loitering around the stadium or trying to get a vantage point from the back hill or the roads or the sidewalks, the chancellor made it very clear. The permission to play there is going to be revoked immediately. So I've already talked to Coach Labuda. I know that he's going to communicate well with his players and his parents. We'll be putting out communication as well. And it's not because Stout's trying to be authoritative on it. It's because they care about the community and they care about their campus and they care about everyone. And they want to do what they can to try to be leaders in terms of keeping COVID down as best as possible.
Tanya?
I'd have to go back and just look at my notes, but if we have to make an investment again of 100,000 for the turf, can we make sure that we have high school markers on it? Because I do believe that was the last time when we did do it for the turf repurpose, I don't believe that we had our high school markers. So it just seems like a really hefty fee. If you're going to collaborate, shouldn't the turf then also be for us too?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, Tanya. There's definitely some limitations on what we can do and what we should do out there. And I do think it's important, even though it was a sizable donation, it was really a percentage of that project. So our ability to negotiate, things on the field and all that stuff is somewhat limited. But I do agree with you. I think that moving forward with the project of turfing the sports complex is very important. River Falls, for instance, they play at UW River Falls. And, that's a nice setup. I don't think it's as nice as Williams Stadium, not even close in my mind. But they still have a turf field on their high school campus because of the student safety. And with soccer, which really that field is the sports complex is a beautiful soccer facility. We just need to finish it off with bleachers and some of those amenities that make it what it really should be. But you can't host tournament soccer, I believe, unless you have a turf field. So the conditions of the field, plus the ability to host and all that stuff, I would definitely think that's something we should look at, but there also has to be the will to do it.
Any other discussion on the COVID report? Okay, thanks, Dr. Joe. We move on to item 5B, Faust petition for safe schools. Tricia?
Yeah, I don't have any specific agenda for this agenda item. I saw that she had sent it to all of us and figured that we should acknowledge and, discuss it. So I don't know if anybody else has anything that they want to mention. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people that left comments, and I've read through them, and I mean, we don't have to agree with them, but I think that they're valid. I mean, they're their concerns and they're sound from, their concerns. So I don't know if there's anything else, Joe, you want to say in regards to some of the concerns. I mean, people are scared.
Yeah, people are scared. And I also understand, why we want to make sure we listen to people in our community. I don't know if I agree with the valid piece. Yes, people are scared, and if I read this petition, I'd be scared too. My kids probably would not be going to school here in person. It's unfortunate that there's just a lot in here that I don't think is valid, and it's just very disappointing. To me, it's very toxic, and I'm glad that we have the COVID-19 report, and I hope people go through that and actually see what this situation is like in our schools. I guess that's all I have to say.
Amy?
I would just like to say that Judy Faust is a pretty respected person in our community, and I really think that she's speaking out because I think teachers are concerned, and I know, Joe, you said many times that they have a chain of command to follow, and they could talk to you about their concerns. And I know the union tried to talk to you, and and since the union wasn't certified, we decided no, that you couldn't do that. You had to go through the proper chain. And I think this was just maybe some of the way teachers felt like they could get through to, or the community, not just teachers, but the community get through to you and what they were concerned about.
Penny?
I'd like to say, based on the information that was provided to the board as a whole by Judy Faust, I went through everything. Based on the information that was provided to us, there were 570 total signatures. 394 were not in district, and 304 were not in state. And that's a little disturbing to me, and it's hard to work off of those numbers when on July 13th, in our COVID report, we were provided with information from our actual teachers and families from the survey that was done, and 817 families and 34 staff members responded indicating feeling comfortable having school with no additional safety measures. And this was before the mask mandate and everything else, but we had more people respond to our survey that are truly in district than responded to change.org. And again, it's based on the information that was provided to us. But I find the numbers interesting and not really connecting with each other.
Tricia?
I just would caution, you're making the assumption that those people that are out of state or out of Menomonie are connected with kids in this district. And I know for a fact that some of them are. I can't say for all of them. Probably there are just random people that have also said something, but it also doesn't diminish what the people who are in the district who have expressed their concerns. And when I say valid, it's their concerns. Again, you don't have to agree with them, but it's their concern based on their logic, and so it's valid in that respect.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know, I really just wanted to make sure that, you know, we acknowledge that there are some concerns out there, and, so that.
Okay,
I'm not saying their concerns aren't valid, not at all. I get it. You have to make the decision that's right for your family. But given the numbers from a random online petition versus a survey given out to our district where families also have the opportunity to make comments, I think we just need to mesh both numbers together and take a look at it. I don't think that their concerns are not valid, but when you've got people signing things from Guam, North Carolina, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, I can keep going through here. It's hard to understand the validity of those signatures. I read the comments and I don't have an issue with the comments, but comparing these numbers to what was given by actual parents and teachers in our district is, to me, not working together.
Charlie, your hand up?
Kind of.
Okay.
I understand that people are scared. It's very disappointing to me that the petition was started on information that's really just not true. I wonder if the people who signed the petition had the right information would have signed it. You can go through each and every one of these points, and it's just not factual information. I guess I'm disappointed that I would love to see a survey that had good factual information and see what people really feel right now. I would love to see that. I would be very interested in that. But this didn't start that way, and it certainly didn't end that way. There is, if you read the district's reopening plan, if you read, tonight we heard about the bus routes, just everything in here is just not factual. And it's disappointing to see that people signed on to it and it wasn't based on actual events.
What I had too, our opening plan was, the board did vote on it 8-1, so some people in the community may not realize that as well. Chris?
Yeah, I think it's important, so I did a count of the numbers, and I got, 175 were from Menomonie, and the only way you can get close to what your numbers are is if you discount people from, like, Chippewa Falls, Eau Claire, so, like, that's a lot of people in a short amount of time that signed on to this. Now, as far as what is said on this petition, this might be incorrect now, but it certainly wasn't incorrect when this petition was made. Those are valid concerns, especially when it comes to our teachers, which were the last people to be considered, and we put our students first. We did. So some people are concerned with the fact that we didn't put everybody first. And so I think that's fair. Oh, what else is on here? There's no provision for distancing on our buses. That's right. Now there is, but there wasn't then. We talked about that. Board of Education approved student participation in high-risk contact sports. Hey, that's absolutely true. Okay. Third, teachers will have no protection, no PPE, no distancing requirements. Teachers are most at risk. It's true. Fourth, the district has no plans for masking after the government's mask order runs out. September 28th, we still don't. So what I have problems with is when good people, take it upon themselves to do some work to raise their issues that maybe we had some problems. I really, really hope that we can look at this and not try to find fault with it and say why these people are bad or why we're disappointed in them. We should ask why they have some valid points in saying why they're disappointed in us.
Charlie?
I'm not done. So the inability of us to accept criticism of our constituents and of people who have a vested interest in our community, not just in our schools, but then what the fallout is for people in our community, that does not look good on us. We should be able to accept reasonable, logical criticism and say, yeah, we could have done better there. We could reach out to our teachers and say, you know, maybe it seemed like you guys came last, but it wasn't because we put you guys last, because we put our kids first. And acknowledging how and why our decision-making went down on buses, which was not made until the 11th hour, or how that went down for the decision about playing high-risk sports. We just have to acknowledge the criticism and accept it. Because that's what we're here to do. We're elected to listen to our constituents, to respond to their criticisms and accept them, make a response to them, and then go forward. Thank you.
Charlie and then Tanya.
I have no issue accepting criticism when it's valid. The first point, the district administrator said most classrooms would have 6-foot distancing. In quote, most classrooms. I listened to the August 24th board meeting. That's not what was said. Listen to it, that's not what was said. The first signature on this petition was August 26th. This petition went up after that board meeting. The buses, there's no provision for distancing on our buses. Chris, at the August 24th board meeting, you and I went back and forth multiple times, talking about what we were going to do on our buses, talking about how we were going to do our best to get the kids as far apart as possible. That does not play with, there is no, in capital letters, provision for distancing on our buses. The teachers have no protection, no PPE, no distancing requirements. Have you read the plan? Have they read the plan? Has anyone read the plan? It's in there. For every single school, it's in there. It says, this is what the teachers are going to do. This is how the teachers should do it. This is how the teachers should treat paper when it comes to them. It's there. And as far as the mask order is concerned, I don't believe we said on September, at any point, on September 29th, we don't know what we're going to do. We didn't say we're going to extend it or not. We didn't say we're going to do anything. The mask order is there. The plan says we're going to have a mask order. It doesn't say on September 29th it's going to go away. The plan doesn't say that.
Tanya.
Charlie just made every point that I had. The only additional item was that we actually approved the reopening plan on August. Sorry, I'm just going back up. The meeting prior, so what is it? The meeting prior to the 24th.
Tim?
Well before the 26th that it was posted. So August 10th, thanks. So.
Amy?
I would just like to say something that maybe might be a little more positive in this situation. You know, maybe we did listen. Because, I will say that the 6 feet, we were very concerned about that. We have 1/3 classes in art. It seems like our constituents and some of us board members have made some inroads into making sure that some of these things are improved. So the way I look at it is, maybe at the time, well, this was true. But now, because of these situations and because of some board members speaking highly and speaking up, I think that we, are doing better.
Dave, I'll give everyone credit who deserves credit in this, and certainly board members, I appreciate your involvement, but I do want to say that, we've been working on these plans all summer, and where we're at today is very indicative of the work we've done all summer. So while I appreciate everyone's involvement, it wasn't because of, a board member speaking out that we're at this level in our classes. Our principals have been working like crazy. Our custodians have been working like crazy all summer to try to do this. And granted, we didn't know what some of the classrooms were going to look like before the virtual school was set up and enrolled. But it's really sad to me that information like this creates more fear. It really damages our school district. I know as parents listen to this board meeting, they listen to other board meetings. You know, I think when the plan was passed 8-1, I think people felt pretty good about it. But the subsequent events after that, I think have really been difficult for a lot of people, and it's unfortunate, because I think a lot of that is within our own control. Even like the union comment, I mean, yeah, we didn't have a separate meeting for the union, but every teacher, every staff member had great opportunity for voice. You know, so to characterize that as shutting them out, or however it was applied, it's just damaging. And I agree with what Charlie said, absolutely. I will absolutely listen and take criticism. It would just be nice if the criticism was based on actual stuff.
Chris?
Okay. Now, I think it's really important. I think we should probably, instead of trying to think about this as like what's damaging to the district, I think that's thinking about this in the wrong way. And it happens too often on this board. When we have people that come here that offer their opinions on things, that take the time to try and raise issues for us that we maybe haven't been as aware of as we should have, we should be thanking them. Now, when I go through each of these things, at the time, these criticisms are valid. Now, we might not be in the same situation we were at that meeting, but certainly we didn't have any plan for what the kids were going to be doing on the buses that ensured that they were going to be following some measures that kept them safe. We discussed that, and we agreed, yeah. So then we were like, Charlie, let's do this. So we said, yes, in the future, we'll come back, we'll try and make sure that we got the buses safe. That came up at the meeting. So at this time, that was true. And then we were going to discuss in the future the buses. It also was true, no one said that we were not going to stop wearing masks, but they did say validly that we didn't have a plan for after the masking order was out. We still don't. That's valid. When they say PPE for teachers, you know, that doesn't mean how they hand in their paper, how they collect the paper. It's talking about what their personal space is. So we might have decided that that wasn't a worthwhile investment for us, but that doesn't mean that this statement is wrong. So I really feel like rather than, you know, criticizing the people who come forward and offer us some ways in which we could take a deep look at ourselves, and pushing it aside by saying, well, if it was valid, I would accept the criticism. It's valid. Also, what's valid is that people put in a ton of work to get us to where we're at right now. But what really bothers me is the way in which the board is divided in such a way that it wants to dismiss people and their opinions and the time we put into these things as somehow being enemies of the district. That they're hurting the district, that it's bad for us, that this is putting fear out there. That's not what this is about. This is about people making citizen action, which is their every right to do, to hold their elected officials accountable. As elected officials, we have to be like, okay, let's take a look at this. Thank you. Not to disparage, not to say they're wrong, not to say that everything they say is absolutely unfounded. That's not acting in the way in which a legislative body needs to act. And this happens too often when people come here and raise issues that we don't want to hear. It's one of the reasons why our board is dysfunctional. And it always falls along the same people defending the same people and the same people criticizing the same people. Always.
Joe?
I guess I would just like to say, I really wonder what it would have been like the last month and a half if, you know, we would have had governance procedures and procedures by the board that were in alignment with the best practices of boards. You know, and turning it back around and, you know, shaming the board for, you know, not accepting criticism or whatever all that was. It's just, it's damaging, and I am so proud of what we've done here, so proud of our staff and our kids, and I really think most people in our community see it, and I do think it's hard when we handle it this way and don't get behind the decisions that were made.
I just want to say from my perspective, extremely proud of the work that the administrator, the team, all the way from our principals, the staff, janitors, the bus company, everybody. I think we've got something to be extremely proud of what the district has done, making the best of the situation, and excited to move forward. So. Chris?
Agreed. Why can't we have both? There's something always about damage control that's always not allowing us to put our best foot forward. Like, it has something to do with like fear, it has something to do with protecting something. We put our product out there, it's a good product, and we should defend it. But that doesn't mean we have to defend it at the expense of not accepting criticism some other ways. We're all elected officials. So we're supposed to get. So I don't see why we can't accept criticism and also say thank you. Thank you. You guys are awesome. You guys have been working your asses off. I don't see why those two things are not able to like be accepted in the same, motion. Thank you for your hard work. I wish that we had worked on some of these things, and I'm glad you raised these issues for us. We're working on those going forward. Something like that. Rather than being like, these people are all wrong. They're all from Guam. They're saying things that aren't true. Those types of dismissive ways in which we're not listening to our constituents is hurtful to us as well. So I just really want us to look going forward. Please just be respectful of the people that have something to say to us. Accept what they have to say, and then we can talk about it, amongst ourselves, how we can make that better. They're not, wasting people's time, and they aren't trying to hurt the district. She's a former teacher. Good one.
Charlie?
Respect goes both ways. And this was not written in a respectful way to the board. So I guess I agree with you, Chris, that if somebody comes to me and has a criticism and it's stated in a respectful way, I'd love to have a conversation with them. But that's not what happened here. This was not stated in a respectful way.
Anything else? Okay, let's move on. Summer school report.
So thank you, Stacy, for all your patience and sitting through 2.5 hours of what we've had so far. Stacy Berg is our new summer school coordinator. She's also a school counselor at River Heights Elementary School. She's served the district in many different capacities over the years, and we're very excited to have her come on board during one of the most challenging times that anybody ever could come on board. Stacy did a great job collaborating with Mrs. Bagley, who had retired. Mrs. Bagley had been the summer school coordinator. And Stacy's going to give us just a brief update on how summer school went this year in a different format than we're used to. So Stacy, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just sitting here, and I ate lunch at 1 because I'm in the trenches and having 8 came here straight from work, and this is very overwhelming. So if I talk about Disney World, I'm really sorry. I'm supposed to be talking about summer school. But summer school is different this year. If you look at the presentation that I made, and yes, it's colorful and nice because I'm an elementary counselor. So let's get happy here about summer school. We had it. Most of it was virtual. I have to say Carla Klinkvist was awesome in getting most of that ready, as was Brian and Joe. We really wanted to have something. Summer school is so important for our community. They count on it for so much, and we usually do an awesome job. And I think our virtual met what we could. So when you look at it, you can see that. I just did a couple snapshots. Most of it was virtual. We went from 4 to 5 days because it was virtual. We kept partnerships with Parks and Rec and the collaboration with UW Scout. Even though they're smaller numbers, I'm really proud that we kept that collaboration. We're going to keep that going. They were the same courses that were offered for high school for credit recovery. All of those students were able to take those courses to get credit recovery, so they're better prepared for this school year. 65 students took advantage of that and received credit. CBT Summer Academy, courses that are offered through CBTC, highest enrollment we've had. So our students are taking advantage of that enrichment, of that college credit. A lot of those were able to meet at CBTC, and it just wasn't all online. My daughter took advantage of that as a CNA, and I was impressed with everything that they did to collaborate with that. You can see that all grade levels participated in virtual learning. Every single school, every grade level had an opportunity to do enrichment, remedial. There was some face-to-face, but every building was involved. And for me, that is a big thing. We didn't exclude anyone. It was open, and they could enroll as many classes as they wanted to, and some of them did. So I think it was a great effort. I think we can look at things. If you look at the pictures, you can see that the kids are enjoying it. Those were just some snapshots. I thought our meet and greet days went really well. We had great attendance, even though it was on certain times. I think our staff pulled through and made it a welcoming event for our families. So I'm excited to be your coordinator for summer school. I've been involved with it for a while. And next time, just put me earlier on the agenda.
We promise.
Thanks.
One question, Stacy. I know our numbers were down this year compared to last, but from the remedial side, did you see a difference in that with the COVID and how that affected your class participation?
You know, we really thought that we would, but the middle school actually saw more improvement with virtual, with kids doing it on their own time. Sometimes we have a hard time with them staying for the whole school day when it's in person. They don't want to be there for those 4 courses if they only have to take 1 remedial. So it was actually really well attended. I would say our second session, which is always true, went down after 4th of July. So a lot of our remediation for K-8 took place before that 4th of July with higher numbers, but there was still participation. Some of our courses, I think, ran better virtually, like our band for middle school. They did an outstanding job. I don't know if any of you have 6th graders entering in, but it was pretty much a one-on-one lesson with our band instructors. So there's a lot to be said for the time that they put in, and our staff is just a great staff.
So it says 625 students participated. Is that
That's
same number as the enrolled?
That's just for summer programming,
Okay.
and that they were enrolled in 1 class.
Okay.
So they could have had more classes, but that is just for summer programming, not virtual, for the high school, not the, I don't know, academies, all those numbers aren't included in that. It was just that 4-week summer programming.
Okay, because I had heard that there were some classes where one student was actually participating in, and I thought, I wonder if more students actually enrolled, and then some people changed their mind, or?
We did have that a little bit, but we took attendance every day.
Okay.
They had great follow through, our teachers did in keeping that data. We're required to do that, so we learned along the way how to do that better for second session, but I think we have good numbers on the attendance.
Okay.
Any other questions? Jim?
This is kind of tangential, but, we were giving away meals this summer, roll up and throw them in the trunk. Do you know how many meals we gave away?
Oh, I know, I tweeted that out a while back. It was hundreds of thousands, I think.
Really?
Like 292,000.
Something like that. It was a ton.
Our food service is amazing.
That probably included spring also when it started, but, and again, Stacy did a very good job under really difficult circumstances. I was really hopeful that we'd be able to have an in-person summer school experience in August. We put a request out to staff, and we just weren't able to staff it. I think some of it probably had to do with the pandemic, but also it's just a really difficult time. Teachers do need to recharge as well, and especially coming off of the spring. So I'm hopeful that we'll see an increase in our programming next summer. I know Stacy already has ideas. And like everything else, I think COVID's gonna teach us some things that, some ways we can do things better. And I'm excited about seeing that in the future too. So thank you so much, Stacy. Get some dinner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 5D, report and timeline for program resources.
So Brian's here to answer questions. You see this pretty much every year, in terms of what the timeline is. In the interest of time, I guess, Brian and I talked about this earlier this afternoon. Are there any questions, or is it just an informational item tonight?
Chris?
Yeah, normally I love the stuff that we get from DPI, but this particular program they put together for arts for us is problematic because of so they have a really involved language when I think about what art is and how we think about art dialogue, art criticism, and thinking about aesthetics and how they can create a dialogue about that. But I mean, I asked and I looked, we don't have any space to expand our arts education here, I don't think. So we have kids in art class in K through 5, that's on rotation, right, every third day. Like, they've got a lot of expectations in there that would really harm the good arts instruction that we're already doing if we were to include the level of dialogue and the thought process and the job prospects in art in addition to what they're already doing. And then in the middle school, and I might be wrong about this, but I think don't they have art for a quarter or like 7 weeks or something like that?
So in 6th and 7th grade, yes, it's on a rotational basis. At the 8th grade level, pre-pandemic, the plan was to transition to an elective option for art to provide them a little more choice in their encore programming that would allow them to go a little bit deeper. So part of the program review of the area of art design is to be able to take some of that a little bit deeper because of that choice that will come in. And that's something that we're going to be working on moving forward.
So that would even be less than I thought that we had to try to accomplish some of the goals that DPI had put out. So I would just strongly suggest that since we have some of the best art teachers on the planet, that we really put it in charge of them in terms of how they want to mediate what they think that would be effective for their curriculum, which is already super effective given the time constraints that we had. Now, if we had more time, we could think about incorporating some of the kind of ideas about how they thought about art instruction, but this is an incredibly complex program that you can't just do for 4 weeks and then just drop it. It's like a foreign language. You have to learn it like every day to keep immersed in the dialogue. And it would be great because it developed a lot of the language skills and the critical thinking skills that maybe our kids don't test that well in. But I was just a little worried when I saw the demands that the program was suggesting given the constraints that we had, and really wanted to reaffirm the fact that we should put this into our art teachers' hands and maybe just stay the course of this one rather than trying to add more to the plate. But that's just one person.
Well, I think it's important to note too that we have an amazing art program here, and we're so fortunate. There are so many schools where elementary art is art on a cart, or it's a traveling teacher, and that hasn't happened here a long time ago too, is my understanding. So I think it's important that we frame this for what it is. We have a very, very good art program, and to classify it as anything else is a huge mistake. But I do think, I think this is an appropriate time for program review, and like the other program reviews, I'm sure Brian's gonna do a great job collaborating with our teachers.
Any other questions? Okay. Process and timeline for 2021 medical insurance renewal.
I appreciated Leah updating this timeline. Essentially, it's the same action plan that we've used over the last several years, updated for this year. Leah has had a lot of close communication with our insurance consultant, and I guess at this point, I'd just like to open it up for any questions or if the board has any concerns with the action plan.
I see nothing, so. Charlie?
Just a quick question. Do you see any major changes? Nothing really major here other than your telehealth?
Correct.
That's it?
Yeah, the plans work very well for us. Our medical fund is doing quite well. We haven't had issues where there hasn't been good service. So at this point, no, there's probably not going to be any major changes.
Any other questions? Okay, discussion item 5F, Paulson petition about use of legal counsel. Tricia?
Again, just like with the other petition, I just submitted them both at the same time, just for discussion and to give you guys an opportunity to respond if you would like, regarding the petition.
Any discussion? Chris?
Yeah, this one I actually signed, because I felt it was not critiquing a policy, but critiquing a process. And the process on this one was fraught with error from the beginning. So I would ask you guys please to deeply consider what the petition is asking, and consider the process that happened in order to make that censure document appear in that meeting. The degree to which that the rest of us were not consulted, the degree to which that the two members who produced this censure document did not consider, any examples of censure, that there was no consideration of what censure has looked like in the state of Wisconsin. And that the rest of the board was not consulted before you made a censure document that went significantly beyond, for example, the drunk mayor of Sheboygan and Senator Joseph McCarthy, who both were censured for egregious, much more egregious actions than happened at that board meeting. Yeah, Joseph McCarthy was the one that started the Red Scare. So there's good reason why you would think if somebody would have actions taken against him, it would have been him, but no. That's not what our, legislatures did. A censure is very clearly a rebuke. So for you to take it upon yourselves to create a censure document that went well beyond any example that I can find in history for actions that were far more egregious than what happened in that meeting. I would hope you would take it on your personal responsibility to realize that what you did was in your interest. It was not in the board's interest.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it up like I did with the last petition numbers, and actually I'm gonna leave out the not in district. There were 517 total signatures. 224 of those were not even registered in our state. We voted on the censure. Our policy says we make the vote, we move forward as a board. I'm really starting to get somewhat frustrated with why are we even voting as a board? That's policy 165 and rule 165. We make a vote as a board, majority rules, we move forward. And now we've had 2 instances tonight where that has not been the case. And it's frustrating, and it's really unfortunate because we look amazingly dysfunctional right now, and it's very saddening to me. People can do whatever petitions they want to, that is their prerogative, that is their choice. But to make these agenda items instead of focusing on COVID, focusing on achievement, focusing on programming, it's starting to get exhausting.
Tricia?
So, I requested these be the agenda items because people cannot come here and speak about all of this. We don't want them to right now with everything going on with COVID. And frankly, I just thought we could have a good old fashioned discussion. But the other thing is that, yeah, I mean, we vote, we approve it as a board. It would have been awesome if I would have known about what was going on before it just got thrown in my lap with the censure when 2 board members knew about it. It was so obvious that they knew about it, but that I wasn't consulted about it. There was I had no idea what was going on. So I agree, but at the same time, you know, I'd like an answer for that, that would be great.
Tanya?
I would love to answer. So I have my handy dandy, you know, looking at keep notes at everyone. So when you talk about this collaboration and secret meeting, never occurred. So ironically, this word censorship, I had no clue what it meant. Our WIS community posted it on their board that that's what the discussion item was gonna be. I think Dave and Joe can both, I sent emails, what does this even mean? How did this agenda item even get out? What is this about? So if you'd like to go back and check, you're more than welcome to, Tricia. So then on Tuesday, that's when I took it upon myself and I researched. I tried to figure this out. What does this mean? Again, there's still no agenda item, but I was going off of what was hearsay on social media, which is ridiculous. Wednesday, yeah, I put together something because I assumed that if I came prepared to the meeting, that perhaps a few of you would also. So I did like I do every meeting, and I sent it to Dave. This is what I got. I don't know what we need, what's gonna go on, what does this look like? You can shake your head all you want. So that's what occurred. That's what I followed through with. Joe, Dave, you can hear, correct me from that point on, that's what I did.
Yeah, and again, I think this is another example of, you know, creating concern within our community. All you board members received a message from me in August that discussed exactly what went down with this. This was a very unique situation. I've never had anything close to this where a board member does what happened. So we did, Dave and I, you know, when the board meeting stopped, to try to cool things down a little bit, we did call the attorney right away, and I stand behind that decision 100%. I made the call in accordance with board policy 142. I mean, you guys get the legal report every year. I mean, we're a big operation. I mean, almost 500 employees, you know, 7 different schools plus the administrative building. You know, we spend thousands of dollars on legal fees every single year. And to me, that's one of the most critical pieces of my job, is to make sure that we follow laws and regulations. And everyone has rights in situations like these. So I called Steve Weld that night, and Dave and I talked to him in my office. And then upon receiving a number of questions and people asking me about censure, I've never been involved in any kind of censure hearing. I've never been involved with what happened. So I did. I reached out to our attorney to find out, first of all, how would we post it? Would it be open session, closed session? You know, I had people requesting for me to set up a meeting. You know, I need to find out how to do these things legally. So I called the attorney again. And Dave, being the board president, you know, it's very important that he is involved with setting the agenda, again, in accordance with board policy. So Dave, I think we had another conference call at one point. But again, I'm the one who made all the contacts with the attorney. When I received Tanya's example from her research, I've never seen a censure document before. I'm not qualified to, you know, determine what a censure document should or should not include. I did watch a meeting from Alaska that happened, and I talked to a bunch of my superintendent colleagues, asking if any of them have ever been through something like that. I mean, this video of that board meeting went viral. I had colleagues texting me and emailing me and making fun of me, and I mean, it was quite the deal. But I finally did find one of my colleagues who knew about the Alaska case, so I did. I watched it, and it was interesting. It was somewhat similar to what went down here. So I did. I contacted the attorney again. I shared Tanya's information and asked him to review it on behalf of the school district. Everyone involved, again, has rights, and I wanted to make sure that the district was not going to be trampling on people's rights. I wanted to make sure that things were done appropriately, whatever they would be. And, you know, we even had the attorney here that day to, again, make sure that things were done properly. The last thing we need in this school district is to violate someone's rights and then have a lawsuit and waste all sorts of resources that should be going to our kids on a huge lawsuit. So again, that's something that's common practice in schools for the district administrator to contact the district or the school's attorney. We have a policy that allows for it, and that's what I followed. And it's really, again, sad to me that all you board members have had this information for quite some time. When Mr. Paulson and Mr. Paulson should know, he was on the board and he served as president for a while. When he put his petition out there, I contacted him right away. I explained to him that it wasn't Ms. Usby or Mr. Steyer that contacted the attorney, it was me. And instead of removing his, I thought maybe he'd take the petition down or something, but instead he put it on me, and amended the petition, making it seem like I had done something wrong, which again is just very, very unfortunate, very, very frustrating, and frankly, I'm really saddened that Chris, you signed it, and then tonight you're again making it seem like something was done inappropriately. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what the attorney did. It doesn't matter what kind of censure motion he drafted. The attorney has no power in terms of making a decision. I mean, I can't remember exactly how long that hearing was, or that it wasn't a hearing, that meeting. What was it, about 2 hours or something? And it went on and on and on. And I can remember at least 3 or 4 different times where, if a board member had an issue with what was on that document, there, just like we did tonight, there easily could have been an amendment. And then the will of the board could prevail. And as far as I know, Chris, I don't remember you making any formal amendments, and, I don't.
That's not the way that went.
Hey,
Well,
Joe,
He just asked me. He said,
I'm not done.
oh, I thought you were asking me right now.
No,
When you said,
I'm not asking
yes,
anything.
please.
My point is that ultimately the board is the one to make the decision. It's my job, just with other policies or contracts or, issues, expulsions, grievances, anything that could come before the board. If we need legal advice to make sure that we're following legal expectations and people's rights, as far as I know, that's what is in my job description, that's what you want me to do. But I think it's very unfortunate that, 2 board members are being called out for doing their homework and trying to lead the district in the way that they think was appropriate. And I think was appropriate.
I haven't said much about this since the whole issue started. Dan brought it up at the annual meeting. Not a single of the 4 board members has asked me from day one how I was affected by what happened. Not one of you. Not a single community member that has emailed me has expressed one bit of concern for how this has affected me, my family. When I come home to my grown-up daughter crying because of what she witnessed on the video, it was extremely hard for me. And for Dan Paulson to make that email or that petition, which was an outright lie, I had nothing to do with it. The attorney stated that in his words. He corrected it a minute or 2 later because he knew it wasn't true. I never contacted the attorney to have him do something with the censure document. And so, I've been on this board now in my 8th year. 6 out of the 7 years that I've received a paycheck from this board, it went entirely back into the district. Donations for music trips, different things like that. For members of this community to sign on to a petition that is false and calling me out on something that I never did is pathetic. And for the board members that have not showed one bit of concern for the victim and who was treated poorly in this case, to me is pathetic. Tricia.
So 3 things. One, Joe, when you called me, you never once said the word censure. You said we're gonna meet on Friday to deal with this. And that's all the information I had. Number 2, if it's not a secret, then why didn't we get it the night before or the day up before the meeting? Why is it that we showed up and then that's when we get the information? And then we're supposed to it was a significant, we've already said this, you didn't know about the, censure document. It was a serious document. And there were legal ramifications in it, and there was nothing that I had an opportunity to prepare for. Number 3, you want to talk about being a victim? I sent all of you guys an email, and I wasn't gonna bring this up because that was why I sent the email, because I'm having a police officer call and talk to me and interview me. And I am a person who had childhood trauma and experiences with the police, not that they were bad, but that they were always in our life. And I emailed and I told you guys, your decision to put that legal part in there and have to take that call from a police officer who interviewed me about what had happened, I immediately started to have an anxiety attack and got sick to my stomach. Do you know who responded to me and who acknowledged it? It was Amy, Jim, and Chris. None of you guys did. So there were not just you as a victim. There was other ramifications, and I guarantee you that none of you, even for 2 seconds, thought about that.
I guarantee you that people did think about it. But you have no idea what other people have been through, what I've been through in my life, the things that have happened to me. So to think that you're the only one that was affected by this and the way that it went down.
But you said you were upset that nobody reached out to you. And I am upset that nobody, except for those 3, reached out to me. And those 3 were not in the decision to create that censure document. And I'm sorry that you went through that. I truly am, that I think that it's not okay. And it's frustrating to me. But at the same time, I chose not to say anything before. That's why I sent the email. Because I didn't want it to be this big dramatic thing.
Amy?
As far as saying if you could have somebody that would take something out and stuff, I know Chris talked a lot about it, but I do remember specifically that Penny said something about what can we take out that'll make this go? And I did not hear exactly what you said, Dave, but I've heard from other people that watched the tape, said that you said you prefer not to go there.
I made it clear that it was me as an individual, not as the board. Chris?
Okay, so you guys have a problem with like sequence of events. And they have a problem with pronouns. And they keep changing. And when you say, the board, we did this, the board, we did not do that. We did not have any idea what we were walking into. We did not say, this is what we'd like to have. We did not say, you need to apply to the lawyer. We didn't do anything. One person apparently contacted Joe, and then Joe contacted the attorney. Now, the problem is that we were contacted. This is a board decision. If you want to vote to censure the guy, you censure the guy, then you make a document. You guys made the document first. You paid for the document. You put a whole bunch of loaded information in the document, and I guarantee you more people than just you and you and you saw that document. Because that was a long document. And if you guys are voting to approve that document without reading it, shame on you. It took me a long time to go through that document, and I didn't even have it done by the time the discussion started. I very much doubt that just those 2 people knew what was in that document. Now, we're not talking about whether or not we censure Jim Swanson. We're talking about process. So please don't tell me that I've got a problem because I signed on to a petition that was about process, not about what happened at the end. Was Penny, did you say that this is the second time this has happened tonight? That's not what the first petition was about. It was about raising an issue. This is about process. It's not about going back and saying, okay, we're not going to censure him now. It's about saying what we do as a board and how we do it. It's very clear that there's a team that's part of the insiders team that knows what's going on around here. Sure as hell isn't me. It didn't happen just this last time either. It happened we pulled out Dr. Walker from retirement to save footballs.
People on the board had contacted him and spoke with him. Charlie Schneider was talking to me during that meeting. I certainly didn't get to talk to him. I certainly didn't know that was like coming in from like a way to make decisions, but it's indicative of how the board operates. There's certain people that are included, certain people that are not included. This happened to be a huge decision that was made where at least 4 people were consulted. And probably only 4 people didn't know what was going on. So when we say that we want you guys to pay for that because you did an action that you thoroughly understood what you were doing without board authority, that's true. When the attorney was here, he said, I did what they told me to do. He wrote the document you wanted. Now, the precedent in Alaska, are you telling me in that you followed that document, Joe, when you said that we were looking at prior precedent? This document that they produced for the censure in Alaska looked like our document?
You want me to answer?
Yes.
No, I did not say that.
Okay, so now this censure document doesn't look like anything I've ever seen. I thought they had an example in Alaska that would fit this. So what has happened is that you created a document that people, probably more than just 2 people, it seemed like Jamie knew what was going on with that document. It wasn't a surprise to you.
What are you doing?
What I'm saying is that things happen in that process that are problematic.
Please don't address my system that way.
I'm just saying that people knew what was going on and we walked into nothing. We didn't have any idea what was going on, and you produced a document beforehand and then dropped it on us. And then either people didn't read the document or they had seen it before. And that was problematic in and of itself. So this is just asking that the people who are responsible for using board authority without the board's authority take responsibility for that, pay for the legal fees, and then we go on.
Joe?
So a couple things. First of all, again, I was the one who called the attorney. Board policy allows me to do that.
That doesn't mean produce a document.
Secondly, Attorney Weld passed out the document that morning. I would have been happy to take a phone, if you had a question about what Tricia did or you did, I would have been happy to talk about it. I have requested board members all the time that if you ever have a question, a concern, a suggestion, that you reach out to me. Some board members I don't hear from except for the Mondays and the meetings at the meeting. So if you ever have a question, please do. But like I said before, the attorney has zero power. I don't think anybody made a motion to table it. I don't think anybody made a motion to amend it. You know, you have power as a board member to do a lot of different things, and you didn't do any of them.
Amy?
I can't remember what I was gonna say. Let Penny take it, let me think. What I was gonna say.
You made a lot of very lofty assumptions, Chris, that I vehemently disagree with. Completely. Saying that the rest of us saw that document ahead of time, that is not true. I'm sorry, maybe I read faster than you do. I was going through it. That meeting was not an isolated incident. You know that as well as I do. You met me in the hallway and saw that I was not comfortable with things that had taken place with board members. And I had said at that point, if anything ever happens like this again, I will call for censure. I didn't have to because it was egregious enough. It happened. And it wasn't just me. There are past board members that also had incidents. This is nothing new. This is not an isolated incident. And this should not be a shock to anyone sitting in this circle, square, whatever you want to call it. So, I'm losing my train of thought now too, so Amy, go ahead.
I remember. Okay, social media, always is crazy. But I will say there was a comment made that somebody said, oh, it's gonna be more than censure. Now, whether they knew what was going on or not, I thought that was kind of weird. you know, who would, I mean, you know, I don't know who would have said something to somebody, but it's just obviously somebody had said something to this person because they said, oh, it's more than censure.
And they may have been referring to a recall petition, because there is a recall petition that was filed.
I'm not talking about the recall petition.
I'm just saying, maybe that's what they were referring to. I don't know, I don't recall seeing that.
Chris? Okay, everything you said, I don't disagree with. What I'm saying is that to produce that document without our knowledge and without our direction, like, you could ask the attorney, can we censure him? Should we have a censure meeting? That's fine. You produced a document that had very specific outcomes that I said at that meeting looked darn like someone was gonna do a recall after that. I said that. And sure enough, it's happening right now.
Are you surprised by that, Chris?
No, because the document set that up. What I'm surprised about is that we didn't discuss this as a board and decide what the censure was gonna look like and what we wanted to make together. You created a document that had a bunch of repercussions that affected all of us. That frankly, I think if you asked the police if they thought this was a worthwhile thing to investigate, they might give you, you know, a different idea about what we were doing with their time. Joe, when you were there in participating in the meetings where there's a document that directs you to call the police, that's problematic. That's kind of unethical. To be participating in the creation of a document that tells you to take action against a board member, you can't do that.
There was nothing on that, but,
Okay, and then, wait, just wait. And if you felt you had to call the police, like, you're a grown man. You can call the police. But to make a censure document that has legal repercussions, that has the police calling us, taking their valuable time, more community resources, because we didn't talk about this before we created the censure document, I guarantee you we would have censured them. We would have done it the right way. But this is about process and about using board's authority and using district money to create a document that was dropped on us. It was ready-made and was voted on without any discussion about what we were going to do or what the kind of protocols were going to be. And in fact, that whole meeting was a waste of time because you already had a document produced. It was like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm trying to say, like, what should we do? I mean, in all good faith. Not knowing that you had already created a document that made that complete waste of time. Because it was already done. Now, when we asked if there was going to be any amendments, I asked Dave. I'm like, remember? And Dave's like, yeah, we'll vote on it. So what we were going to do was vote on that, to vote that down, and then create a new censure document. Rather than doing that, that's what we did. That's what we were voting on. And that's, Dave's like, yep, let's vote. 5-4, done.
You were asked repeatedly, Chris, if you had any amendments that you wish to make by Charlie on the motion, and you said, I've done my part as a board member. And it was after that that we voted on it, on the censure document. Penny, and then Charlie.
Amy even referenced the fact, I opened the door to make amendments or changes if anybody wanted to in the document. I threw it out there. Steve Well even said, you could do it. We could have done it, and no one chose to. I put it out there, so I don't want to hear that that wasn't even an option.
Charlie?
Chris, first of all, as far as Dr. Walker is concerned, I was preparing for a meeting, which I think is certainly within my right to do, to call someone that I know and that I respect to say, hey, what do you think about this? I wasn't doing anything as the board. I was just calling someone that I know and respect to say, what do you think? I fail to see where there's any problem with that at all. As far as the censure is concerned, like David said, I looked at you just like I'm looking at you right now, and I said, is there anything I'm not sure you understand, is there anything you want to change? And you did exactly what David said. You went like this and said, I've done everything I need to do. So you had the opportunity. We often do things in committees and so forth, where or even that the policy change tonight. I brought a sample policy. Rather than bringing a blank sheet of paper, I brought a sample policy. We talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, changed it, and we came up with something. To bring a blank sheet of paper among 9 people who are very emotional at that point in time, that meeting would have been much longer and much more chaotic than it was. It would have been a disaster. It was brought as here's a sample, here's something we could do. And by the way, careful when you start accusing people of saying that they saw it. I never saw it, I never read it, I never had anything to do with it, I never contributed to it or was asked to contribute to it. So be careful there. Lastly, we are way off our agenda. Our agenda item is to talk about the petition from Mr. Paulson, not the censure of Mr. Swanson.
Okay, so I will take questions or issues related to the censure document that's on the agenda. Chris?
Correct. So all these things that we're talking about that we're getting
I'm sorry.
sidetracked on, are sort of outside of the fundamental question in the censure, which is who pays for this? And was it outside of your authority, the two of you, to create a document that the lawyer executed, that then brought here to the censure meeting, that contained a lot of material and actions that were extraneous to a censure? So I would say that I haven't really, strayed far from that basic point. That whatever everyone's relationship is with Mr. Swanson is sort of irrelevant. The problem that we all have, who have problems with the way it's put down, was the way in which that you used the lawyer, you had the lawyer execute a document, we paid for that document, and then it was brought to the meeting before we had any discussion about what we were going to do and how. So whether or not I screwed up by not amending that document is totally not relevant here. The point is that you used authority that wasn't a we, that wasn't the board, that wasn't discussed. You created a document that was created by 2 people. It was executed by a lawyer that cost money. Purely under your own, auspices. So because of that, I think you should pay for it. And I think the petition is correct. If you had done it the right way, which was to come in and make a censure and review, and then we make a document after the fact, this would not be a problem. But you didn't do it the right way. You didn't follow a process that what a board does and how a board operates.
So again, this is similar to other issues where, Chris, you're making it seem like 2 people did something they shouldn't do. Dave and Tommy did exactly what the board member should do. There was a meeting called, there was an agenda sent out, I believe by Jamie, and they did research, they offered information. Now the policy tonight, I didn't need to call the lawyer on that policy. We subscribe to the policy resource guide. So I'm able to cross-check that policy with other sample policies, and I've dealt with these kinds of policies many times. Some more complicated policies, then yes, I do need to call the lawyer. And I know Mrs. Bryce said in her message that WASB provides free legal service. They do. And I try to maximize that as much as possible. But they also have a schedule of fees, and when you're dealing with something specific, that fee schedule would apply. In our district, for those types of situations, works with attorney well. So I've said this, I emailed the board on August 21st, I've said it again tonight, and you continue to make it seem like Tanya and Dave called the attorney. They did not. I called the attorney because I do not know how to draft a censure letter. The last thing I want to do is violate anybody's rights, especially a board member. So that's why I took the information, had the attorney come, and again, that's when the decision was made. And you were part of that decision.
Charlie?
Chris, can you show us in any of the policies, probably 142, 161, what specifically was violated?
Okay, then when we make a censure, that's a board decision. It's a collective action.
And the
We act collectively to vote to rebuke Mr. Swanson for his behavior, right?
Yeah.
This was doing something outside of that context, where we collectively act as a board to make a decision. Now, whether or not you contacted the attorney, and you have a right to contact the attorney, doesn't mean that you two shouldn't have the obligation to contact us and let us know what you were doing. If you had done these things, we wouldn't be having a problem right now. Like, if you had showed us the draft of what you wanted to do and then went to the attorney, and I was like, yeah, that draft looks great, go ahead. But you didn't. So this is the problem. And if you had done it beforehand, we would have been able to tell you, look, these things are problematic and they shouldn't be in there because they're part of the censure. But we weren't given the opportunity to do that. Now, if I screwed up in the meeting and I thought that we were going to vote it down and we'll make a new one, because most of that censure document wasn't a censure. So I didn't see anything worth saving in the document. A censure is a review. So when you operated outside of the board authority to create the censure document, that's my problem. And if you had given us an instrument that you're going to use, if you'd given us the draft you're going to use, or any way you're involved in discussion, that would be different. But instead, a ready-made document was created that had a lot of problematic features that we didn't have an opportunity to look at, to review, and that was intentional. You very easily, like you normally do, you could have emailed us at any time.
Or put it on board docs.
Anyway, you could have done whatever you wanted. You text us, you email us. You had every opportunity to allow us to be part of the process. But that wasn't the case. And that's what our problem is that we were shut out of that process.
Joe, and then Charlie.
First of all, I'm sorry for interrupting you. When you paused, I thought you were done. I apologize. So just to make sure I'm clear, so you want Tanya and Dave to pay the legal fees for when I called the attorney?
No.
Okay.
I want them to pay the legal fees for the constructing of the document that they handed to him and had him write. That's what he said he did. He said, they gave me the document and I wrote it up. Now, if you're saying that he is wrong or incorrect, I don't know. But what I'm telling you is that what I want them to pay for is not contacting the attorney, but the creation of the censure document that we didn't have input on. That's the only thing I want them to pay for. And I believe that they should know, both of you guys should know that we should be included in that process.
Chris, a couple things. First of all, I'm the one who sent the censure document to the attorney. So it's really the same question, it's like, so you expecting them to pay because I decided that an attorney should look at that. And then secondly, I think it's an ethical responsibility of mine to do that. I think it's critical to protect the school district anytime we're dealing with something that's like this, anything that can be legal. So I don't understand where the impetus is that you would want 2 board members to pay when I received the censure document and I felt like it needed to be, I don't have the expertise, I felt like it needed to be reviewed by the attorney, so I sent it to the attorney. And they never, I don't know where you're getting that quote from, that he said that they handed it to him. That wasn't the case at all. Did you guys have any communication with Steve Weld that I don't know of? I'm the one who communicates with Steve Weld on behalf of our district. So I just don't know where this is coming from.
Charlie first.
So Chris, after your long monologue there, the answer to my question is no?
I'm not sure if I remember your question.
My question was, can you point to a policy specifically and say this policy was violated in this way?
Okay. I don't think I can, but that doesn't mean that, and I can just correct, I think what you said, I said, happened. My problem is, right, is that we had no consultation on the creation of that document, that you decided, whether it was you or them, doesn't matter. That they created and then the lawyer executed. We should have all been involved in that conversation about what type of document we wanted to draft. Instead of that happening, we brought a ready-made document that had all sorts of problematic ramifications that was voted up or voted down. So we should have been contacted. It's not even your job, but I mean, if you two were gonna create a document that you agreed on, you at least could have sent it to us. I think you two are some of the two that would prefer to have information before we get to meetings, aren't you?
Chris, I would caution against board members sending stuff out like that. You talk about a quorum issue.
You could have said it
And
for them.
the attorney, well, no, they can't be, you guys can't be collaborating on documents even through me. And it's very typical for me to bring forward a policy and then the board to modify that policy based on what you feel it best fits our school district. But again, to Charlie's question, I mean, what is it that you're saying was not done in accordance with board policy? Because board policy clearly says that I can contact the attorney when I need to.
Yeah, about about district business.
Isn't that district business?
No, this is a board matter, where a board is legislative body, which doesn't even include you. That's why you didn't vote on it. It's us that's disciplining our member. It's not like it's somebody that works for the district. If that was the case, you would have every right to do that.
But who's gonna get sued if that process is the district that's gonna get sued?
This is a measure that's not, it's a censure. It's behavior that's in the board situation that is not you're not in charge of this. It's not under your purview. It's purely a board decision that has to happen. And to take it outside of that process and execute it as if it's just another way in which you're disciplining a potential employee is not the case. That's not what we're doing here. So frankly, you shouldn't have been involved in this at all. We should have had a meeting. We should have said, we're gonna have a meeting, we're gonna talk about what we should do about Jim's behavior, and then we gotta hash it out. But instead, you execute it as if you're executing another aspect of district policy or district actions. This isn't. This is a board that is discussing board behavior, and we were the ones that were rebuking them, not you.
I didn't. You're right, I didn't vote. But, Chris, we've spent thousands of dollars in the last several years on board issues that have required legal advice. And that's what the board hires me to do, is to get that legal advice and to share it. The document came super late Thursday night, and we didn't get it handed out until the attorney brought it Friday morning. It's not like people were sitting on this document. I mean, the meeting where this blow-up happened was on Monday. Then the information about the document first came on Wednesday. The attorney had to do all his stuff. I mean, you're making it seem like people were sitting on this thing and not sharing it. And the board, again, spent 2 hours reviewing the document. If someone didn't feel like they had time, they could have tried to table it or whatever, or amend it, and none of that happened. So it still goes back to the petition though. There really is no issue here. I am the one who called the attorney. I mean, you're not asking me to reimburse the district, are you?
I don't believe that if you did not create the document, then they directed you to an action. You took it upon yourself, I guess, then to contact the attorney to then write this up rather than get collective board opinions on it. I thought it was just these two guys.
I made it very clear to Chris. I emailed the entire board on
It's
August
even more
21st.
problematic than if you're the one that's executing all these decisions along the way, that you're directing yourself to then call the police on Jim.
I didn't create the document.
Okay, it's like on one hand, you're responsible for it, you want to take all the authority, and the other hand, you're like, I didn't do anything. I was just a mechanism. You can't have it both ways. The fundamental thing that we are asking for, I think, and we should just vote on it and be done with it, is that I firmly believe that Tanya and that David went outside of their obligations as a board, executed a document without discussion from us, gave it to you, maybe you were the mechanism, but that's convenience. Have a lawyer write it up, and then if it wasn't ready until the night before, you should have just delayed the meeting then.
You could have
You
made a
can't
motion to do
just put it all on us that you dropped this bomb on us in a meeting and it's all our fault because we screwed up somehow. There were plenty of chances along the way where you guys could have contacted us and should have for a board action. And so for you guys to say that we didn't make any mistakes, it's problematic for me. Because this was not another example of how the district operates and you like taking punitive measures against somebody in a classroom. This was a board action. And that's what the censure does. The legislative body does it.
Amy?
I would just like to say that, I agree with Chris that maybe it could have been postponed. And very often, like today, that email came from the person that, wanted to see if we could use the sports complex for football or whatever. Very often, people send things today, or, today, or to you individually as board members. And then we ask you to send it out so it doesn't create a walking form. So if we had waited some time so that we all can see that document and sent to us or whatever, and waited the time, I think we wouldn't be where we are today.
I just want to say that I think I still go back to Joe's responsibility as superintendent, and I think he acted properly with what he received and how he contacted the attorney, and that's my belief. I think this petition that states that I sent things to the attorney and should be responsible for legal fees is completely inaccurate. Penny?
I was just going to say, did you not feel that it was important for us to show our community that that type of behavior was not appropriate and that it was not okay, and pushing it off another week, another 2 weeks, that's setting a tone that bullying is okay. It was important that it happened in the time frame that it did, so that our community could see that we will not stand for that type of behavior.
I still think though the procedure could have been different. Sorry.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, but
What did you say?
I said, I still think the procedure could have been different.
Okay. Chris, and then Charlie.
And it doesn't just could have been different, it has to be different. Like, if we don't get this as a board, like, how we execute decisions is important, that shared governance is not like what we're supposed to be doing. That's problematic. And that for people in this board to say, yeah, there was no problem what happened, that was all done according to the book. That's exactly what should have happened. That's gonna set us up for the same thing to happen again. Because once again, we can't take criticism. We can't say we could have done things better. We can't say that this carries repercussions that we're all gonna be sorry for later. Rather than that, it has to be another 5-4 vote, where 5 people are like, yup, it was perfect, and 4 people are like, I feel like crap. This wasn't what I thought I was signing up for when I ran for this position.
Charlie?
Well, I've been on the board since April, and I can tell you this isn't what I signed up for either.
Yeah.
The 5-4 vote thing, and perfect, I can tell you when I walked out of here that day, I felt nothing was perfect, all right? I did not feel good about anything that happened here that day. It was totally unnecessary, it shouldn't have happened. But for one person's actions. Nobody else in this room had anything to do with that, but one person's action. When I walked out of this room that day, I felt terrible about what happened. Nothing was done. To say that everything was done correctly or incorrectly, you made it sound just a moment ago that because I said no, I don't believe that any policies were violated. That doesn't mean that I felt that things were done as good as they could have been. We can always learn from things. We can always do things differently. But when you say that a policy was violated or we did something wrong, it's a whole different story. I recommend to you, so that we don't get into this, bring a policy forward that makes sure that this doesn't happen again. If you think that what happened was incorrect and we shouldn't have done it the way that we did, then you bring a policy together, you bring in something that you've developed and say, this is what I think should happen. And then the board can vote on it and we can discuss it, just like we did on the other policy that we changed today.
Chris?
I don't know the board policy number, because I don't have it in front of me, and I apologize for that, but we've been through this board norms, how we operate as a board collectively, what our obligations are to each other, how we communicate. This has been a constant discussion since I've been on this board. It's not like I'm mentioning things that are not unknown to people. So for 2 people to create a document that is a censure document,
right, that has got a whole bunch of things that have never been part of any central document I've ever seen. To say that they did their research, and then to create this document and then have us not know anything about it before we walk into it is just wrong. That violates all of our board norms about how we make decisions and how we share information. So that's problematic. And frankly, I bet that if you apologize for it and said, look, we won't do this again, I bet this would probably go away. But rather than acknowledging that mistakes have been made and we could have handled it better, we just wind up in the same place we're gonna be at the end of this evening. And it's gonna be just as bitter and just as divided as we were before. It shouldn't have to be that way. We're just discussing a petition. I signed it. Because I think there's deep problems in this board that if we don't address, it's gonna keep getting worse. So what I was hoping was gonna come to this discussion is that we're gonna come to an agreement that like, yeah, we should not have done that. Yeah, there were parts of that that we shouldn't have put in there. We learn from it and then we go on. That seems like how collective boardsmanship should operate. And that's absolutely part of our policy, Charlie.
I'm sorry, I missed that last thing you said.
That's absolutely part of our policy for board members.
The one thing that I would like to see is an apology from Dan Olson of this petition, saying that I took actions and did things because that has hurt my reputation in the community. People that who know me and don't know the situation, what actually happened, sign the petition. And so, and Dan was made aware of the mistakes that he had in the statement and didn't take it down. Why would he do that? To hurt my reputation or what? Chris?
I'd like to apologize if I got that wrong. I was signing the petition not for the facts that were in the petition, but to hopefully bring this up to discuss what would happen, how it went down, what we did, and to acknowledge that we made some mistakes that should never happen.
Thank you, Chris. Anything else? Okay, item 5G. Review items related to next meeting dates, board committees, and reports. We have a meeting coming up September 28th. As Joe said, that'll be the day the governor's mask restriction is due to expire, so stay tuned. We'll see what happens with that, if he reissues it or what goes from there. Anything else, Joe? Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Chris made the motion, second. Charlie, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.